Hey guys. Tonight we race slipping way back further than you might think, to the foggy edges of prehistoric coastlines, where the first humans ever laid eyes on whales and probably thought, okay, what in the world is that? Picture this. You ray cold, hungry, wrapped in whatever animal skins you managed to scrape together, and out there in the surf, something the size of a cliff just breathes one casual spout, and you ray soaked from 50 yards away. You probably WOULDNT last the first day out here without modern snacks and a heated blanket. But that's okay, we ray just visiting. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here, too. One sleepy soul at a time. But for now, just breathe, allow your eyes to grow heavy and your body to soften, and let the hush of winter carry you to sleep. Let's begin. You stand on a pebbled beach somewhere along what will someday be called the Pacific Northwest. Maybe 10,000-12,000 years ago. The air smells sharp with salt and pine drifting down from the ancient forest behind you. The tide pulls back, exposing slick rocks and tangled kelp. And you crouch low, gathering muscles, because dinner doesn't gather itself. The sky is that heavy coastal gray that makes everything feel softer, quieter. Waves hush in and out like someone breathing slowly beside you. Then the water parts. Not dramatically, no movie music swells, but gently, almost politely. A broad, barnacled back rises, dark and shining, longer than any canoe your people have ever lashed together. It rolls forward, slow as a turning log, and you catch the white scars crisscrossing its skin. Old stories etched by orca teeth. Her ice flows far to the north. A gray whale, though you have no name for it yet, you just know it as enormous. And it's looking right at you with one basketball-sized eye that seems mildly curious, like it's wondering why you ray so small and noisy. You freeze, your heart suds louder than the surf, but the whale doesn't charge or vanish. It simply exhales a deep, foggy whoosh that smells faintly of shrimp and deep ocean, and the mist drifts over you like a cloud. Tiny droplets settle on your face. You taste the sea on your lips and realize this creature has been breathing longer than your entire band has existed. Your people have stories already. Of course. Oral histories passed around fires about ravens stealing daylight or salmon people returning each year. Whales fit right in. Some groups along these shores will come to see them as ancestors who chose the sea over land, carrying the souls of chiefs on their backs. You watch calf pods playing in the shallows, mothers teaching them to dive, and it feels familiar, like watching your own children learn to walk. The NucleH. Many centuries from now, we'll call the gray whale QWIQWITSA, something like one who stays close to shore, because they migrate right past your villages twice a year without fail. But here's a mainstream piece everyone learns eventually. These early coastal peoples were some of the first humans anywhere to actively hunt whales, not just scavenge beached ones. Archaeological sites in Korea and Norway show harpoon points from nearly as far back. But on the northwest coast, you ray already experimenting. You lash stone points to you with shafts, seal the joints with spruce pitch, and wait for the right moment. It's dangerous. Sacred work. Only certain families have the songs and rituals that let them approach the whale without angering its spirit. Now for the odd little detail that makes historians grin. Some of those early harpoons were tipped with mussel shells. Yes, the same mussels you were just collecting for dinner. Ground sharp, glued on with pine resin. They worked surprisingly well against thick blubber, lightweight, razor-edged, and biodegradable. Long before that was trendy. Imagine explaining that to a modern whaling museum curator. Yeah, we used dinner scraps as warheads. You paddle out one dawn in a cedar dugout that took months to burn and carve 8 of you. singing low to keep rhythm. Sliding through mist so thick the world disappears beyond arm's reach, the whale surfaces nearby. Unhurried you strike not in anger, but in gratitude, and the line sings out. You would thrumming the whale sounds, pulling you on what your descendants will call a Nantucket sleigh ride. Though that name is still thousands of years away, you ride the tension between life and death, between need and respect, until the whale tires and you finish it with lances, then you tow it home, singing the whole way, because the whale has gifted itself to feed your village for months. Historians still argue over exactly when and where the first deliberate whale hunts began. Some push it back to 6000 BCE in Korea. Others point to Bequia or Olympic Peninsula sites, but everyone agrees it required serious cooperation, spiritual preparation, and a worldview that saw whales as persons, not property. You don't own the ocean as giants. You negotiate with them. As evening settles, you sit on the beach again, belly full of fresh whale meat roasted over alder coals. Children play with a blown-up section of intestine like a beach ball, bouncy, weird, and apparently timeless. Out beyond the breakers, more spouts catch the last light. Silver plumes against a rose-gold sky. You feel small, but not in a bad way, more like you're part of something much older and slower than human hurry. The tide keeps breathing, the whales keep traveling, and somewhere in the salt wind, you sense the beginning of a very long conversation, one that will span millennia, full of awe, mistakes, and slow understanding. Tonight, though, it's just you, the pebbles under your bare feet, and the quiet knowledge that tomorrow the ocean will still be full of wonders too big to hold. You lean back against a driftwood log, letting the rhythmic hush of waves pull your thoughts apart like seaweed in the current. The stars come out, one by one, familiar even though constellations haven't been named yet. Somewhere far below, a whale sings a low, moaning call that vibrates through water and sand and bone. You don't know the song's meaning, but you feel it anyway, like a lullaby from the deep. And as the fire behind you burns down to embers, you let yourself drift, carried on that ancient sound, into whatever dreams the sea is willing to share. The salt wind shifts, carrying you forward through centuries like a slow current. You live behind the cedar-scented shores of the ancient Northwest and find yourself standing on a rocky promontory overlooking the Bay of Biscay. Sometime around the year 1000, at the water below is a restless steel gray, flecked with whitecaps, and the air smells of wet stone and distant rain. You pull your wool cloak tighter because even in summer, this coast knows how to bite. Far out on the horizon, a spout rises, thin and elegant against the clouds, then another right whales, feeding close to shore, rolling lazily as they sieve krill through those endless curtains of baleen. You watch from a stone lookout tower built by people who have been doing this longer than almost anyone else on Earth, the Basques. You walk down narrow paths to the tiny port of San Sebastian, or maybe Orio, names that haven't quite settled yet. The village clings to the hillside like barnacles, red-tiled roofs glowing softly in the mist. Men mend nets, sharpen harpoons, and speak a language that sounds like no other in Europe. Ancient and musical, these are the first commercial whalers history clearly remembers, while Vikings are still mostly chasing walrus and the English are figuring out herring. The Basques have already turned whale hunting into something organized, almost gentle in its efficiency. A mainstream fact everyone picks up eventually. By the 11th or 12th century, Basque whalers were regularly taking North Atlantic right whales and selling the oil and baleen across Europe. Churches needed lamp oil that didn't smoke too badly, and whale blubber burned clean and bright. Monasteries bought it by the barrel. The Basques kept the trade quiet, almost like a family recipe. No big announcements, just steady profit. You join a crew launching at dawn. The boat is a sturdy chalupa, broad-beamed and low, rowed by 7 men who move like they share one heartbeat. No sails yet. Wind is unreliable. This close to shore you sit amidships, gripping the thwart as the oars bite water. The harpooner stands in the bow, balanced easy, iron in hand. Yes, not young, but his eyes are sharp. They spot the whale before you do. A mother and calf, drifting in to feed on plankton blooms, pushed against the coast by the prevailing winds. The approach is whisper quiet, no shouting, no drums, just the soft creak of oars in thole pins and the hush of the sea when the harpoon flies. It's almost polite. One clean strike behind the blowhole. The whale sounds, but not in panic. These animals are slow, trusting the line runs out smooth, buoyed by inflated sealskin floats that bob like oversized fishing corks. The crew waits. Patience is the real weapon here. Here's the quirky detail that always raises eyebrows. The bass used a special tax system called the 10th whale. Every 10th whale caught belonged to the local lord or monastery. No arguments. Imagine trying to explain that to a modern accountant. Royalties calculated in entire 40-ton animals. Sometimes the 10th was settled in cash equivalent, but often enough, the church literally took delivery of blubber stacks on the beach. Practical spirituality at its finest. Hours later, you stand on the shingle as the whale is towed in. The village turns out women, children, old men, everyone with a knife or bucket. They work fast, but respectfully, cutting the blubber in long spiral strips that come off like peeling an orange the size of a house. Tripots, big iron cauldrons set into stone furnaces, bubble on the shore, rendering oil that pours golden into barrels stamped with bass marks. Baleen gets bundled separately. Someone in Bruges or London will turn it into corset stays or umbrella ribs centuries from now. Historians still debate exactly when the Basques started crossing the Atlantic to follow whales to Newfoundland. Some say as early as the 1400s. Long before Columbus got lost looking for spices. Secret charts. No flags flown, just quiet seasonal camps on the Labrador coast. They kept it so hush-hush that when Cabot discovered those waters in 1497, he found Basque fishermen already drying cod and boiling blubber like they owned the place. You spend the evening in a low-ceiling tavern, drinking hard cider from wooden cups while someone plays a 3-stringed instrument that sounds like wind over rocks. The talk is all whales. Which grounds are holding, how the calf crop looks this year, whether the price in Bayonne will stay high. No one brags. Success is measured in barrels filled and families fed, not in tall tales. Later, you walk back to the lookout tower alone. The moon is up, silvering the water far out. More spouts catch the light brief, ghostly plumes that vanish almost as soon as you see them. You think about how these people have learned to read the sea like a book. Wind shifts, bird flocks, the color of the water itself. They take what they need, but they don't empty the ocean. There are rules. Who can hunt, when, how many. The whales keep coming back, year after year, like neighbors keeping an appointment. A soft rain starts to fall, cool on your face. You lean against the stone wall, listening to the village settle into sleep behind you. A dog barks once, a baby fusses, then quiet out on the bay. A whale breaches slow, heavy, joyous before sliding back into darkness with barely a splash. You realize this is the first long chapter in a very long misunderstanding. The Basque see whales as generous providers, almost partners in a seasonal dance, but soon enough, other nations will watch, learn, and decide bigger boats and sharper greed might work better for now. Though, the balance holds. The oil lights quiet chapels across Europe, and the whales still return each autumn, trusting the same rocky coast that has welcomed them for centuries. You close your eyes, letting the rain and distant surf blur together into one steady rhythm. Somewhere beneath the keel of the world, Those massive hearts keep beating, slow as tides, and you drift with them, carried forward on the same current that will one day bring new ships, new hungers, and new mistakes. The current carries you westward, across seasons and centuries, until the misty cliffs of the Biscay fade into memory. You open your eyes to a different coast, entirely one of towering cedars marching right down to the water's edge. Their roots tangled in salmonberry bushes and sword ferns. The air is thick with the smell of resin and salt, and the beach beneath your bare feet is made of smooth gray stones polished by endless waves. This is the Pacific Northwest again, but not the ancient time you left behind. Now it's the era of red cedar longhouses and woven cedar bark capes, of villages that have grown confident and complex along the sheltered inlets of Vancouver Island, the Olympic Peninsula, and southeast Alaska. You stand on the shoreline of a Maka-H village, Nuka Sound, perhaps, or is it watching the morning fog lift in slow ribbons out in the strait? A pod of gray whales passes close enough that you can hear the wet rush of their breaths. The people around you don't flinch or cheer. They simply nod, the way you might acknowledge an old friend who always shows up on schedule. These are the whale peoples, Maka-H, Nuchah, Nult H, Quiluta, Haida, Tlingit, names that echo differently in every dialect. But the relationship is the same. Whales are not wild animals to be chased down. They are persons. Powerful, generous, sometimes dangerous persons who live in a village beneath the waves, governed by chiefs and protocols just like the ones on land. A mainstream truth everyone eventually learns. Indigenous nations of the northwest coast were among the few in the world to regularly hunt whales. From open water canoes long before iron or sails, they pursued humpbacks, greys, and sometimes even fins or rights, using methods refined over thousands of years. 8-man crews in seaworthy dugouts up to 40 feet long. You would harpoons tipped with mussel shell or outbone barbs, lines coiled from cedar withes and sealed with pitch. The hunt was led by men who had undergone years of spiritual training, bathing in cold streams, fasting, praying because no one believed skill alone could bring a whale home. You watch one such crew prepare at dawn. The whaler in the bow wears a woven spruce root hat shaped like a cone. Rain sliding off it in sheets. His harpoon shaft is painted with family crests. A thunderbird, a wolf, a whale emerging from the sea before they launch. The wife of the harpooner sings a quiet song over the weapons, asking the whale to give itself willingly. No one laughs or doubts her power. Everyone knows stories of whales that turned away when the rituals were skipped, or of hunters who vanished after taking without respect. Here's the delightful oddity that always makes people blink twice. Some whalers used inflated seal bladders not just as floats, but as decoys. They depaint eyes and a mouth on them, tether them to drift, and wait for curious whales to come investigate what looked like a lost calf or a rival seal. Imagine the whale's surprised mild annoyance, probably when it nudges the fake and gets a harpoon instead. Resourceful, a little cheeky, and oddly respectful all at once. The canoe slips into the water like it was born there. You feel the surge beneath you as the paddlers dig in unison, blades flashing silver. They don't chase every whale. They wait for the one that lingers, that circles back, that seems to offer itself when the harpoon strikes. The crew sings louder, not triumph, but gratitude and apology braided together. The whale may tow them for hours, a slow thunderous ride across the swells, until it tires and the lances find the heart and lungs. Then the songs change to welcoming, guiding the whale's spirit home to its underwater village so it can be reborn. Back on shore, the entire community gathers. You help haul the massive body up the beach with ropes braided thick as your thigh. Children run alongside, touching the barnacle skin in wonder. The cutting in is methodical, Sacred. Blubber for oil and trade. Meat for feasts that will last months. Sinew for cordage. Bones for tools and art. Nothing is wasted. The oil lights winter potlatches where chiefs give away stacks of blankets and copper shields to prove their wealth and generosity. Whale oil and dried whale meat travel hundreds of miles inland along grease trails, traded for obsidian, dental IUM shells, mountain goat wool. Scholars still argue over how sustainable these hunts really were. Some say populations remained stable for millennia. Others point to archaeological dips and suggest even careful hunting had cycles of boom and restraint, but no one disputes the depth of the relationship. Whales appear on totem poles as crest beings, in origin stories as transformers who taught humans respect, in songs that mimic their calls note for low, rumbling note. You spend a winter evening inside a longhouse. Cedar planks glowing amber in the firelight. Smoke curls up through the roof hole, carrying the scent of roasting salmon and whale blubber crackling in ironwood boxes. An elder tells the story of a chief who married a whale woman. She came ashore in human form, but her children could swim like seals and sing like whales. The family crest still shows her emerging from the waves, hair streaming water. You listen, half dozing on piled mats, feeling the house breathe around you like a living thing. Outside, the rain has softened to a hush against cedar shingles. Through the open door you glimpse moonlight on wet sand. And far out, the rhythmic flash of spouts as another pod migrates south. The people here don't see the whales as resources to exhaust. They see them as neighbors who share the same long house of the coast, one half on land, one half below the surface. Misunderstandings will come soon enough, when strangers arrive with different stories about ownership and conquest, but tonight the balance holds. You pull a woven blanket higher, soft cedar bark on one side, sea otter fur on the other, and let the steady drum of rain on the roof pull you under. Somewhere in the dark water, a whale exhales, long and slow, and you feel the sound in your chest like a second heartbeat. The conversation between land and sea continues, patient as tides, older than any border or flag. And as the fire settles into embers, you drift deeper, carried on that shared breath, into dreams where you walk the ocean floor among cedar longhouses lit by bioluminescence, welcomed by hosts who wear whale fins like capes. The rain on cedar shingles fades into the creak of wooden hulls and the snap of canvas catching wind. You blink, and the longhouse smoke is gone, replaced by the sharper tang of pine tar and salt water off the Atlantic coast. It's the early 1600s now, and you race standing on a narrow wharf in Plymouth or perhaps Jamestown, watching English colonists in stiff collars and wool doublets stare out at the same gray whales their Basque trading partners told them about. The new world feels raw. Trees still crowd right to the water's edge. Wolves howl at night, and nobody is quite sure how anything works yet. A shallop, a small open boat borrowed from the ship that brought you across, bobs at the dock. A handful of men climb aboard. Eager and underprepared, they've heard stories. Whales come close to shore here, practically beaching themselves. And one good carcass can light a whole settlement for a year. Back in England, whale oil is expensive, imported from the Basques or the Dutch here. It drifts by on the tide like a gift. What could go wrong? Everyone knows the broad outline. English colonists along the Massachusetts and Long Island coast began drift whaling in the early 17th century, waiting for whales to strand or come very near shore, then rushing out in boats to lance them. It was opportunistic, scrappy, and often messy. No one sailed far offshore yet. They simply posted lookouts on dunes and waited for the cry of whale off to send crews scrambling. You join one of those crews on a cold March morning. The wind is out of the northwest, sharp enough to make your eyes water from the top of a sandy bluff. The lookout spots a pair of right whales cruising slowly along the outer bar, spouts catching the low sun like smoke signals. Bells clang. Men tumble out of houses half-dressed, grabbing harpoons and lances that look suspiciously like repurposed farm tools. The boats launch in a chaos of splashing oars and shouted instructions no one quite agrees on. Here's the wonderfully odd detail that always gets a quiet chuckle. Many of these early colonial whalers used poison to finish stranded whales faster. Yes, poison. They row out with bottles of burning liquor, usually a nasty mix of arsenic or hemlock, brewed by the local apothecary, and pour it into the lance wounds. It worked. Eventually, but slowly, and sometimes the whale thrashed for hours. Imagine the smell on the beach afterward. Blubber, blood, and colonial chemistry gone wrong. Practical, in a grim pioneer sort of way. You row hard, thighs burning, until the shallop bumps alongside the nearer whale, a cow, maybe 40 feet, rolling lazily as if confused by all the tiny boats buzzing around her like gnats. Someone stands in the bow and drives an iron in deep. The whale flukes once, gently, soaking everyone, then sounds the line. Hemp rope, thick but not nearly long enough, snaps taut and sings off the bollard. Your boat jerks forward so fast the oarsman in front of you nearly tumbles overboard. It's exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. But things go sideways quickly. The whale doesn't tire the way the stories promised. Instead it heads straight out to sea, dragging two boats behind it like toys on a string. The third boat tries to cut in with more lances and only manages to tangle its own line by noon. One boat has swamped in the swell, the men clinging to the whale's back like barnacles. The poison is slow, the bleeding slower, and the tide is turning. Eventually, the whale beaches itself on a sandbar, half alive, and the crews wade in with waist-deep water to finish the job with whatever sharp things they have left. Back on shore, the village turns out again. Women with buckets, children wide-eyed, dogs barking at the sheer size of the thing grounded on their beach. Cutting in is exhausting and haphazard. No one quite knows the best order. Blubber peels off in ragged chunks. Meat spoils faster than they can salt it, and half the oil ends up seeping into the sand. Still, they fill a dozen barrels, enough to trade with passing ships for nails, cloth, and rum. Success, of a sort. Historians still debate how much these early colonial efforts actually dented local whale populations. Some say the coastal right whales were already declining from Basque and indigenous hunting farther north. Others argue the colonists' wasteful methods accelerated a crash that became obvious by the 1700s. Either way, the seeds of a different attitude are planted here. Whales as windfall resources, not persons to negotiate with. You sit that evening on a split-rail fence, watching the sun bleed red across the water. The carcass lies half submerged, gulls already picking at it, and the smell will linger for weeks. Someone plays a fiddle nearby, a jaunty tune that feels oddly out of place. The men toast with cider, already telling taller versions of the day's chaos. No songs of gratitude tonight, no rituals to guide the whale's spirit home, just tired satisfaction and plans for a taller lookout tower next season. Out beyond the breakers, the calf that lost its mother circles once, spouting short, anxious puffs, then turns north alone. You feel the small ache of that separation, though no one around you mentions it. The ocean keeps its own counsel, vast and indifferent. Later, wrapped in a rough blanket inside a drafty cabin, you listen to wind rattle the shutters and waves worry the shore. The day as excitement settles into your bones like cold, you think about how quickly you can slide into entitlement when survival feels urgent. The colonists aren't cruel, they were just hungry, cold, and far from home. But the misunderstanding deepens here, one opportunistic carcass at a time. Sleep tugs at you. Slow and heavy the fiddle has stopped. The dogs have quieted. And the only sound is the endless hush of surf erasing footprints in the sand you drift. Carried away from this raw young coast toward harbors that will soon grow richer. Ships that will sail farther. And hungers that will grow sharper still. The raw colonial beach dissolves into inky night. And you find yourself drifting through a quiet library lit only by whale oil lamps. The year is 1851. And the book in your hands is heavy, freshly bound. Its pages still crisp. You open it. And the words pull you straight into the Pay Quad S forecastle, where the air smells of tar, tobacco, and the faint sweetness of sperm aceti candles. Herman Melville's Moby Dick has just hit the shelves in America. And already people can stop talking about it. Some call it genius. Others call it unreadable. And whalers themselves mostly shrug and say the man got a few things right, but exaggerated the rest. You close the book and step outside into a Nantucket evening. Fog rolling in thick off the harbor. The streets are brick and cobblestone, lined with grand Greek revival houses built on blubber fortunes. Widows in black bonnets walk arm in arm. Because this island has sent more men to sea than almost any other place on earth. And not all of them come back. You pass a tavern where old captains argue over coffee about whether the white whale is real or just Melville's fever dream. The mainstream story everyone knows. Moby Dick, published in 1851, turned the American whaling industry into myth almost overnight. It took real ships, real dangers, real boredom, and wove them into an epic about obsession, fate, and the limits of human control. Ahab's mad quest for the albino sperm whale captured something deep in the national psyche: ambition, vengeance, the belief that nature could be conquered if you just tried hard enough. You wander down to Strait Wharf, where a brig is unloading casks of oil under lantern light. The crew looks tired, but proud. 3 years out, round the Horn and across the Pacific grounds. Home with a full hold. One of them, a harpooner with Maori tattoos peeking from his sleeve, laughs when someone mentions the book White Whale. Seen plenty pale ones, none that held grudges yet. Even he admits the story feels true in the bones. The way the sea can get inside a man and rearrange him. Here's the quirky detail that always makes people smile. Melville himself only spent about 18 months at sea total. Yet he wrote over 600 pages that feel like a lifetime. He borrowed heavily from real accounts, especially Nathaniel Philbrick's favorite, Owen Chase's narrative of the Essex, sunk by an enraged sperm whale in 1820. But Melville added Shakespearean monologues, encyclopedia chapters on whale anatomy, and philosophical rants that no actual forecastle hand ever delivered. Critics at the time complained it was too long and too weird. Readers today argue over whether it's the great American novel or just a very long shaggy whale story. You board a packet ship leaving for New Bedford at dawn, just to feel the motion again as the island slips astern. You think about how the book both celebrates and quietly mourns the industry. Melville describes the try-works at night, those brick furnaces on deck glowing red, flames licking up through boiling blubber, turning the ship into a floating inferno. Sailors blackened with soot, faces demonic in the firelight, yet singing hymns to keep rhythm. It's beautiful and hellish at once. And America couldn't get enough of the image. Back on the mainland, you visit a lyceum hall where a lecturer is reading passages aloud to a rapt audience. Gasps when Ahab nails the gold doubloon to the mast. Laughter at the chapter about chowder on Nantucket. Tears quiet ones when Quequeg asks for a coffin to be made in advance. The crowd is bankers, shopkeepers, farm boys who've never seen the ocean, all leaning forward as if the story might save them or warn them. It does both. Scholars still debate whether Melville intended the white whale as God, nature, America itself, or just one very annoyed cetacean. Some say the book as failure in its own time, poor sales. Mixed reviews mirrored the slow decline of the industry it immortalized by 1851. Petroleum was already seeping out of Pennsylvania ground, and kerosene lamps were flickering on inventors' workbenches, but nobody in that lecture hall knows the end is coming. They only feel the grandeur. You spend a foggy evening walking the New Bedford waterfront, past rope walks and sail lofts, chandlers selling everything from harpoon irons to hardtack. The air is thick with the smell of oil soaked into wharf timbers over decades. A street preacher shouts about Jonah and repentance, using the white whale as his text. Children play a game of tag around stacked tripods, pretending to be Ahab chasing Moby around the world. Later, you sit on a bollard watching the harbor reflect 1,000 lantern lights, each one fed by the same oil that built these cities somewhere out there. Real sperm whales are diving deep, clicking through darkness. Unaware they've become symbols. You think about how stories work. They take a dangerous, dirty, often boring trade and turn it into legend. They make people feel larger than they are, even as they warn that some things are too large to conquer. A bell buoys clang softly in the distance. The tide turns, pulling water out toward the open Atlantic. You feel the same pull toward longer voyages, bigger ships, the peak and then the slow fall. But tonight the story holds you gently, like a hammock swaying below decks. You lean back against a coil of rope, letting the fog settle cool on your face. The harbor breathes slow and steady, and somewhere in that rhythm you hear echoes. The creak of spars, the flap of canvas, a mad captain whispering to the night about destiny and defiance. The words drift over you like mist, softening the edges of everything. Sleep tugs gently now, the way a ship eases away from the dock on a fair wind. You let go of the wharf, let go of the lanterns and the arguments and the grand obsessions. The ocean waits, patient as ever, ready to carry you farther along this long, tangled conversation between humans and whales. And as the last light winks out behind you, you slip into dreams where the sea is inky black and starlit, where a great white shape glides just beyond reach, not vengeful, not divine, simply vast and ancient and quietly watching. The fog of Nantucket lingers in your clothes as you step aboard a sturdy bark named for some captain, as sweetheart or hometown, maybe the Charles W. Morgan or the Sunbeam. It hardly matters. The year is somewhere in the 1840s, the absolute heart of the Yankee whaling era. You swing your canvas sea bag over one shoulder and climb the gangway, while the maid eyes you like he has already decided you'll be useless for the first month. The deck smells of fresh tar, new rope, and the faint ghost of old oil soaked deep into the planks. Three-mast tower above you, rigged square and clean, ready for a voyage that might last 3, 4, even 5 years. This is the golden age everyone pictures when they think American whaling, a mainstream fact drilled into every school kid. Between roughly 1820 and 1860, the United States dominated the world's whaling fleet at its peak. Over 700 American ships sailed the oceans, crewed by more than 20,000 men, chasing sperm whales across every sea from the Arctic to the Antarctic. New Bedford alone called itself the richest city per capita in the country, all built on barrels of oil rolling down its wharves. You stow your gear in the forecastle, a dim, low space forward where 20 green hands and veterans will sling hammocks cheek by jowl. Someone has already carved a crude whale into the beam overhead. The cook, a grizzled black man from Cape Verde, clangs the bell for supper. Lobs, cows, and hardtack. Coffee thick as mud. You eat standing up, listening to the old hands spin quiet yarns about GAMS with other ships in the middle of nowhere, or the time a whale staved to boats in one lower. At dawn the lines are singled up. The capstan turns with a melancholy song, And the ship slips her moorings. You stand at the rail watching Nantucket or New Bedford fade astern. Gray shingles turning to a thin line. Then nothing ahead lies the Atlantic. Then the Horn. Then the vast Pacific grounds Japan. Hawaii. The Line Islands. The offshore ground names that feel like poetry even when you rave freezing or sunburned or bored out of your skull. Here's the odd little gem that always makes people pause. American whalers carried entire libraries of boredom remedies. Ships often had small collections of books traded at every port. Dickens, the Bible, sensational novels about pirates and crews formed debating clubs, singing groups. Even theatrical companies below decks won logbook records of performance of Othello on the equator, with the carpenter playing the Moor in blackface soot and the cooper as Desdemona in a borrowed petticoat. All this on a greasy, rolling deck while the try-works smoked nearby, culture blooming in the unlikeliest soil. You settle into the rhythm quickly, 4 hours on watch. For off. Day after day aloft in the maintop. You scan an empty horizon until your eyes ache. When the cry finally comes, there she blows. Everything explodes into motion. The captain appears like magic on the quarterdeck. Calm as Sunday, boats are lowered with a precision born of endless drill. You pull in or in the mate's boat, hard hammering, as the whale sounds and spouts ahead. A big bull sperm, maybe 80 feet of muscle and mystery. The approach is all stealth and timing. The harpooner stands in the bow, legs braced, iron poised when he darts it home. The whale reacts instantly. Breach, fluke, run. The line smokes out of the tub, sizzling against the loggerhead. You back water furiously to keep from being towed under. Hours pass in a blur of spray and shouting until the whale spouts thick blood and rolls fin out. Then the long tow back to the ship. Lancing finished, and the heavy work begins. Cutting in is brutal ballet. Tackles rigged to the mainmast. Massive hooks biting blubber. Long spades peeling blanket pieces that swing aboard in dripping slabs. The deck runs slick. Sharks follow for days, snapping at scraps. At night the try-works roar to huge iron pots set in brick. Blubber chopped small and fed to the flames, until oil runs clear and golden into cooling tanks. The ship becomes a factory afloat. Smoke blackening sails. Soot in your hair, your clothes, your dreams. Historians still argue over how sustainable this frenzy really was. Some calculate that American whalers alone took over 200,000 sperm whales in the 19th century, driving populations down sharply in many grounds. Others point out that sperm whales are deep divers, wide-ranging, and hard to count even today. So the true impact remains murky. Either way, the ocean was never the same after those decades of relentless pursuit. You spend quiet evenings off watch, leaning against the try-works chimney for warmth, staring at stars so thick they feel close enough to touch. Someone plays a fiddle softly, old Appalachian tunes or mournful CCHNDs. Letters from home are read aloud and passed hand to hand until the paper wears thin. You learn that time stretches strangely out here. Weeks blur into months, yet a single whale strike sharpens everything to crystal. One calm night on the line, the ship lies becalmed under a moon so bright the sea glows. Silver porpoises play around the bow, and off the port quarter a lone sperm whale spouts, slow and deliberate, as if keeping pace. No one calls for the boats. The captain just watches through his glass, then lowers it and says nothing. You feel the weight of that silence. Respect, maybe regret, maybe simple exhaustion. The whale sounds with a final graceful arch, leaving only ripples that spread and vanish. Later, slung in your hammock, you rock gently to the ship as breathing. The scent of oil is everywhere now, worked into your skin like a second identity. You think about the cities back home, lighting their streets and parlors with what you've boiled out of these gentle giants. Progress. They call it wealth, manifest destiny on the waves. Sleep comes slow, wrapped in the creak of timbers and the soft slap of water against copper sheathing somewhere deep below. The real owners of this ocean keep their own counsel, diving miles down where no iron can reach, singing in frequencies no human ear will understand for another century. You let the ship's slow roll carry you under, away from the smoke and the toil, toward whatever grounds tomorrow will bring rich or empty. Calm or storm-lashed the voyage continues, long and strange and full of quiet wonders, just like the one you ray on right now. The ship rocks gently under a sky full of unfamiliar southern stars, and you find yourself drawn to the warmest spot on deck. The glowing brick try works amidships its night watch, sometime in the middle of a long Pacific voyage, and the furnaces are roaring to huge iron pots bubble like cauldrons, fed constantly with chunks of fresh blubber that hiss and shrink in the heat. Flames leap up orange and red, painting everyone as faces in flickering light. Turning the sails overhead into blood-stained canvas, the air is thick with smoke, sweet fat smell, and the low crackle of rendering fat. This is the heart of the whaling ship at work. No romance here, just sweat, soot, and the steady drip of liquid gold into the cooling tanks. Everyone knows the basic process. After a whale is brought alongside and cut in, the blubber is hoisted aboard in massive blanket pieces, then sliced into thinner horse pieces, and finally minced small with sharp spades so it cooks faster. The try works, those portable brick ovens, built right on deck, boil it down over a fire box stoked with the crispy scraps left behind. The resulting oil is ladled into copper coolers, then barreled for the long trip home. Simple, brutal, and astonishingly efficient for a floating wooden factory. You stand near the pots with the rest of the watch, feeding the fire or skimming scum with long-handled ladles. Your face burns from the heat, but your feet stay cold on the greasy planks. Sparks swirl upward like fireflies, and the ship rolls just enough to make the boiling oil slosh in slow, hypnotic waves. Someone hums an old hymn to keep time while turning the crank that stirs the pot. The melody feels strange against the pagan glow of the flames, half prayer, half incantation. Here's the wonderfully strange detail that always makes people tilt their head. The try-works fire was often started and kept alive using the dried, crispy scraps or fritters left after the oil cooked out. In other words, the whale fueled its own transformation. Crews would carefully save those brittle bits from the last boil-up, store them dry, and use them like kindling for the next one. Self-sustaining pyres at sea. Imagine explaining that to an environmental engineer today. Zero external fossil fuel for the entire rendering process. Just biology turning itself into commodity. Hours pass in this red-lit world. You lose track of time the way you lose track of everything else out here. The deck runs ankle-deep in oil and blood. Sharks bump the hull below, drawn by the scent. Gulls wheel overhead even at midnight, screaming for scraps. The smoke blackens everything: your clothes, your skin, the rigging. Aloft by morning, the ship will look like she's been through a battle. Sails tarry and dark, crews streak like chimney sweeps, but the hold will be a few barrels richer. And that's what matters. You take a break to lean against the try-works chimney, feeling the heat soak into your back. The stars above are impossibly bright. The Milky Way, a river of light you could almost scoop with your hand. Someone passes a tin mug of coffee, bitter, scalding. Perfect conversation is low and easy. Which ground they'll raise next? Whether the old man will push for the Arctic this season? How many more whales they need for a full ship? No one talks about the animal itself much anymore. Its cargo now, measured in barrels and dollars. Historians still argue about exactly how much oil an average sperm whale yielded. Estimates range from 30 to over 100 barrels depending on size, season, and species. But the classic 50-barrel bull became the benchmark dreams were built on. They also debate the human cost. lungs damaged by constant smoke, eyes strained by glare, bodies worn down by endless heavy lifting in rolling seas, yet crews kept signing on, drawn by late shares that could make a forecastle hand rich if luck held. You watched the mincing crew work under lantern light, their blades flashing as they sliced Bible leaves, thin sheets of blubber that looked disturbingly like pages from a giant book. The comparison isn't lost on the more literate hands. Someone jokes that they ray printing money straight from the ocean, another mutters that it feels more like burning libraries. No one laughs long, the heat is too intense, the night too vast. Later, when the pots finally cool and the fires are banked, you help scrub the decks with sand and holystones until the planks gleam pale again in the moonlight. The ship smells different now, cleaner, sharper, like a promise kept. Oil barrels are racked below, stowed tight against shifting. The watch changes, and you swing into your hammock below, rocking gently as the vessel steers westward under easy sail. Sleep comes wrapped in that lingering sweet smoke scent. You dream of fire and water braided together, of massive hearts rendered down to light parlors thousands of miles away. In the dream the flames speak in low, bubbling voices, telling stories older than any logbook. You listen without fear, because out here everything is transformed, eventually blubber to oil, boredom to patience, men into something harder and quieter. The ship sails on through darkness, her wake glowing faintly with disturbed plankton somewhere ahead. More whales dive deep, clicking through blackness, unaware that tonight another piece of their world has become lantern light for strangers. The misunderstanding deepens with every barrel filled, every flame fed. You drift deeper, carried on the warm afterglow of the try-works, into a sleep as slow and steady as the rendering itself. The ocean breathes around you, vast and patient, holding all secrets in its cool depths, while the small human fire burns brightly on the surface, just for now, just for this one long night. And as the last ember dies to ash, you let go completely, sliding into dreams where light and darkness trade places without judgment, where everything melts and reforms in endless, gentle cycles. The glow of the try-works fades behind you, and the deck grows quieter as the ship sails into calmer waters. You find yourself below decks in the dim, cramped forecastle during a long stretch of empty horizon. Days have blurred into weeks with no spouts, no excitement, just the endless creak of timbers and the slap of waves against the hull to keep from losing your mind. You reach into your ditty bag and pull out a whale tooth, scraped clean and smooth, about the size of your fist, a broken needle, some lampblack mixed with oil, and a jackknife are all you need. This is how Scrimshaw begins, one slow line at a time. Everyone knows the iconic image, delicate engravings on whale teeth and bone, pictures of ships, sweethearts, mermaids, and patriotic eagles carried home as gifts. Scrimshaw became the signature folk art of American whalers in the 19th century, turning idle hours into something beautiful and lasting. Thousands of pieces survive in museums today, proof that even in the easiest, most brutal trade, people needed to create. You sit on an upturned bucket near a slush lamp swinging from a beam, its whale oil flame flickering just bright enough to work. By the tooth rests in your lap, cool and heavy. You sketch lightly at first with the needle tip, pricking tiny dots that form outlines. A full-rigged ship under sail, maybe the one you ray on right now, or the one you dream of owning someday. Then you rub ink into the punctures, wipe away the excess, and watch the picture darken and sharpen. The process is slow, almost meditative, perfect for a mind that has nothing else to do but count waves. Here's the quietly delightful detail that always warms people. Many whalers used whatever pigments they could scrounge. Lampblack was common, but some mixed in gunpowder, berry juice from island stops, even candle soot scraped from the try-works chimney. One famous piece in the New Bedford Museum has red accents made from crushed cochineal bug spot. In a Chilean port another has faint blue from laundry bluing stolen from the stewardess stores. Resourceful creativity at its most stubborn. You work for hours, days, sometimes weeks on a single tooth around you. Others do the same. The cooper carves a swift boat out of pan bone. The third mate etches a detailed map of the Pacific grounds on a jaw section big as a tabletop. Someone fashions busques thin curved strips of baleen for corsets back home. Engraved with love poems or Bible verses, tools or improvise. Sail needles, broken harpoon tips, even shark teeth when metal runs short. The forecastle becomes a floating studio. Quiet except for the scratch of points on ivory and the occasional muttered curse when a roll of the ship ruins a line. Subjects vary with mood and memory. Homesick green hands copy pictures from old newspapers or Godey's Lady's book. Fashionable ladies in crinolines. Heroic generals. Clipper ships racing under clouds of sail. Veterans prefer scenes from the voyage itself, lowering for whales. Cutting in under stormy skies. GAMS with other ships where mail and gossip were exchanged mid-ocean. Some pieces are political. Anti-slavery slogans. Portraits of Lincoln years before he as president. Even quiet protests against the captain's temper. The tooth becomes a private diary no officer can censor. Scholars still debate how much scrimshaw was actually done at sea versus polished up later in port. Some pieces are so finely detailed they seem impossible on a rolling deck by flickering light. Yet logbooks and journals mention men working at the scrimshaw during dog watches. Others argue island carvers or professionals back home did finishing touches for sailors who only roughed out designs. Either way, the art captures a truth. Endless boredom births surprising beauty. You finish your tooth one calm evening. Holding it up to the lantern, the ship heels gently. Sails full on a fair wind. Your engraving shows a whale breaching under a tropical moon. Tail curved like a question mark around the edge. UV prick tiny stars and, almost hidden, the initials of someone waiting in New Bedford. It's not perfect. Lines waver here and there from the ship's motion, but it's yours. You wrap it carefully in a scrap of red flannel. Already imagining the look on her face when you step down the gangway years from now. Later, you climb on deck for air. The night is soft, phosphorescent, sparkling in the wake. A few hands are still working by lantern light hung in the rigging. Heads bent over their pieces. Someone softly sings a homesick ballad about Nantucket girls overhead. The Milky Way arches like a bridge no one will ever cross. You lean against the rail, feeling the tooth's smooth weight in your pocket. Out in the darkness, a sperm whale breaches once, twice, then sounds with a graceful fluke that throws starlight in sheets no one calls there. She blows. The watch just watches. Quiet. Maybe tomorrow the boats will lower again, and the cycle of chase and render will resume, but tonight the ocean feels shared, not conquered. You stay there a long time, letting the cool trade wind wash soot from your skin and worry from your thoughts. The scratch of needles below continues, faint and steady, like a heartbeat under the deck. Each tiny mark is a small refusal to let the long, empty hours win. Each picture is proof that even in pursuit of something as brutal as oil, people still reach for beauty. Sleep tugs gently now. The way a fair breeze fills the sails without effort. You swing below, sling your hammock, and let the ship's slow cradle rock you. The tooth rests against your chest. Cool and solid in dreams you sail across its polished surface, following engraved lines that led not to ports, but to quiet places inside yourself. You didn't know were there. The voyage goes on, patient and strange, carrying small carved miracles in sea chests toward home, and you drift deeper, carried on the soft rhythm of needle on bone, into a sleep as delicate and lasting as the pictures themselves. The engraved tooth slips back into your pocket as the ship rounds Cape Horn and steers north again. Chasing rumors of breach grounds off Nantucket and the Gulf Stream, you stand at the rail one crisp autumn morning in the 1830s. Coat buttoned against a wind that still carries a bite from southern ice. The water is a deep indigo, flecked with whitecaps, and the lookout aloft sings out in that familiar, drawn-out call. There she be LOOOWS. 2 miles off the starboard bow, a cluster of lazy spouts hangs in the air like smoke signals. Southern right whales, slow, curious, thick with blubber rolling at the surface as if the ocean were a cradle built just for them. These are the whales that gave the species its grimly practical name. Everyone learns it eventually. Whalers called them right whales because they were the right ones to hunt floating oil factories that swam slowly, stayed near shore, yielded massive quantities of baleen and blubber, and conveniently floated when dead in the early days of Yankee whaling. Before sperm oil became the prize, right whales along the North Atlantic coast were the foundation of the trade. New England ships cruised from Labrador to the Carolinas chasing them, and later rounded the Horn to find even richer populations in the Southern Ocean. You watch the boats lower with practice speed for of them this time, because a pod of 6 or 7 cows and calves offers too many targets to risk with fewer. The oars flash in unison, pulling toward the nearest pair, a mother and half-grown youngster feeding side by side. The whales don't dive deep or run far. They seem almost indifferent to the approaching boats, surfacing regularly, spouts drifting downwind like gentle warnings no one heeds. The harpooner in the lead boat stands poised, iron gleaming, and lets fly. The strike is clean, the line runs smooth, and the whale barely reacts at first. Just a slow roll and a deeper dive that pulls the boat along at a walking pace. Here's the oddly poignant detail that always catches in the throat. Right whale mothers were known to stay with wounded calves for hours, even days, nudging them to the surface to breathe, refusing to abandon them even as lances found their own hearts. Crews sometimes took the calf first to keep the cow nearby, an intentional cruelty disguised as efficiency. Journals record men feeling uneasy about it afterward, writing in private logs about the low, mournful calls that carried across the water long after the killing stopped. Practical men, doing practical work. Yet something in those sounds lingered. The work proceeds steadily. One by one the whales are brought alongside, lanced until they spout thick crimson, then towed back to the ship in a long, grim parade. The deck becomes a chaos of cutting in blanket pieces so thick two men can barely hoist them, baleen hanging in black curtains longer than a man is tall. The try-works roar day and night, boiling out oil that runs clearer and paler than sperm, perfect for lamps that don't smoke. Baleen is bundled carefully, destined for buggy whips, umbrella ribs, and the fashionable hoop skirts that will sway through ballrooms back east. Nothing is wasted, yet everything feels heavier than usual. You help flick the endless sheets of blubber into the pots, hands raw from cold and grease. The mother whale's carcass lies alongside longest, her calf already processed, and sunk gulls wheel and scream. Sharks tear at the discarded bits. Someone remarks quietly that the cow had barnacles clustered thick around her blowholes, old ones, years of growth, meaning she survived many migrations, many seasons of raising young. No one answers. The only sounds are the scrape of spades, the hiss of fire, and the constant slosh of the sea. Historians still argue over how quickly the North Atlantic right whale population collapsed under this pressure. Some estimate that by the 1840s only a few hundred remained from tens of thousands a century earlier. Others pushed the decline later, pointing to continued sightings into the 20th century. What isn't debated is the speed with which whalers shifted grounds, first north, then south, then to sperm and bowhead, always following the next right whale until there were almost none left in easy reach. Evening settles with a rose-gold sky reflected in oil-slick water. The deck is scrub pale again, Barrels racked below. Baleen stacked high under canvas. The crew eats fresh whale steak fried in its own fat sweet. Rich. Strangely tender, and no one complains about the menu tonight. You sit on the windlass, legs dangling, watching the horizon empty out. The pod is gone, only a few stray spouts far away mark where survivors have fled deeper offshore. Later, you lean against the Tri-Works chimney for warmth. As the fires die down, the stars come out sharp and close. Someone plays a slow tune on a mouth organ. Notes drifting across the quiet deck. You think about names, how language shapes what we do, calling them right made the taking feel inevitable, almost courteous, as if the whales themselves agreed. But out there in the dark water, the remaining cows call to empty spaces where calves used to answer. The sound carries on the wind, low and searching, and for once no one mocks it or tries to mimic it for laughter. Sleep pulls at you, heavy as wet rope. You swing below to your hammock, the ship rocking gentle now on a long swell. The scent of fresh oil and cooling iron wraps around you like a blanket. In dreams you float alongside the great black bodies, feeling the slow beat of massive hearts, hearing songs that have no translation, but plenty of sorrow. The ocean keeps its ancient rhythm, patient beneath all the small human hurry. You drift deeper, carried on that rhythm, away from the greasy deck and the stacked barrels toward quieter waters where names matter less and presence matters more. The voyage continues, but something has shifted imperceptibly, like a tide turning far out at sea, and you let the slow roll of the ship lull you under into a sleep as deep and dark as the grounds the right whales have fled to, hoping distance will keep them safe a little longer. The last baleen bundle is lashed tight under canvas, and the ship turns eastward, running before a steady trade wind that smells faintly of land. Even though home is still months away, you stand watch one quiet evening in the late 1850s, leaning against the rail as the sun sinks into a molten horizon. The sea is empty of spouts tonight, and the logbook shows the hold nearly full. Another successful voyage by the old measures, yet something feels different in ports of call from Honolulu to Valparaiso. You've heard the talk. New wells in Pennsylvania gushing black gold that burns cleaner and costs less than anything boiled from blubber. Kerosene. They call it the future. Apparently, everyone knows the turning point. In 1859, Edwin Drake struck oil in Titusville, and within a few years kerosene distilled from petroleum began flooding the market. Whale oil prices wavered, then slid by the mid-1860s. Lamps across America glowed with rock oil instead of sea oil, and whaling ports that had bustled with outfitters and chandlers started to quiet down, one empty wharf at a time. You watch the wake curl away behind the stern, phosphorescent sparkling like scattered coins. The crew gathers amidships for a smoke and quiet talk. Someone pulls out a crumpled newspaper from the last mail packet. Headlines about petroleum stocks, new refineries sprouting like mushrooms back east. The old hands scoff at first. Nothing can replace good sperm oil for lubrication or fine lighting, but the younger ones, the ones with shorter lays and longer dreams, listen closer. They've seen coal gas lamps in San Francisco, heard about electricity flickering in laboratories. The world is speeding up, and this ship feels suddenly slower, older. Here's the gently ironic detail that always gets a soft laugh. Many whaling captains invested their profits in the very thing that would undo them: shares in early oil companies, land leases in Pennsylvania, even partnerships with Drake himself. They chased whales around the globe to light the world, then helped fund the fuel that made their trade obsolete. Imagine retiring from 30 years at sea only to watch your savings multiply from the stuff pumped out of the ground. Bittersweet progress. Served neat? You help reef sails one stormy night off the Horn, hands numb on icy rope, and think about the Tri-Works now cold and dismantled for the homeward passage. No more red glow, painting the decks demonic. No more sweet fat smoke blackening the sky. The ship feels lighter in a way that has nothing to do with cargo. Barrels of sperm oil still command decent prices in New Bedford. But everyone knows it. Borrowed time. Bowheads in the Arctic might hold out a little longer. But sperm and right whales are scarcer every season. The ocean isn't empty yet. But the easy riches are gone. In the faux CSLE that night, someone reads aloud from a letter. A wife back home writing about new kerosene parlor lamps that don't smell of fish and burn twice as bright. The men laugh. Half proud, half defensive. Let them have their stink-free life. One mutters, we gave him the real thing first. Another carves a final scrimshaw swift, a tiny bust with a picture of the ship under full sail and the date etched small beneath. Gifts for people who may never fully understand what the voyage cost. Historians still debate exactly when the tipping point came. Some mark 1859 with Drake's. Well, others the post-Civil War boom in petroleum infrastructure. A few push it to the 1870s when prices truly collapsed. What ISNT argued is the speed of the fall. From over 700 American whalers in the 1840s to fewer than 40 by the 1890s. Cities built on oil money turned to textiles, tourism, anything else. Widows' walks on Nantucket roofs watched for ships that came home half empty or not at all. You spend a calm afternoon on the quarterdeck with the captain, helping him sight the sun for noon latitude. He is quiet today. Glass steady on the horizon. Finally, he says, almost to himself, we lit the world for a good long while. No bitterness, just fact. Then he smiles faintly and adds, and the whales get a breather now. I suppose you nod, surprised at the admission from a man who has spent his life chasing them. Land birds appear one morning, little warblers exhausted from migration, resting on the rigging before fluttering on sign of the Gulf Stream. Sign of home. The crew cheers them like old friends. You feed one crumbs from hardtack, watching its tiny heart beat against bright feathers. Life insisting on continuing, no matter what fuel humans choose next. Evening finds you again at the rail, watching porpoises race the bow. The water is warmer now, carrying scents of pine and salt marsh from continents you can yet see somewhere deep below. Sperm whales still dive and click through darkness, their numbers thinned but not broken. You think about light, how it has always been the prize. Blubber to flame, coal to gas, oil from stone to kerosene. Humans reaching for brightness in the long night. The ship sails steady, canvas drawing full and clean for once without soot stains. Stars come out familiar now, the same ones that will shine over New England roofs. Soon you feel the long voyage winding down, not with triumph, but with something quieter, acceptance, maybe relief. The misunderstanding shifts again. Whales no longer necessary, humans no longer dependent. A strange kind of distance opens between species that once shared the same dangerous dance. Sleep settles soft and easy tonight, the hammock rocking gentle in a following sea. No try-works smoke in your clothes, no grease under your nails, just clean salt air and the faint promise of land. You drift, carried homeward on a current that feels almost forgiving, toward harbors that will greet you with new lights flickering in windows brighter, steadier, no longer fed by the slow rendering of ancient hearts. And as the ship lifts and falls on the long Atlantic swell, you let go completely, sliding into dreams where light comes from everywhere and nowhere, where the ocean glows on its own, and no one needs to chase anything across endless horizons anymore. The ship drops anchor in New Bedford Harbor one gray morning in the 1870s. Sails furled and try-works long cold. You step down the gangway onto a wharf that feels strangely quiet. No crowds cheering, a full hold. No rush of coopers and oil merchants. A few old hands nod recognition, but most folks hurry past under umbrellas, headed to cotton mills or shoe factories. The petroleum age has settled in like fog that one lift, yet something new stirs in the air. carried on newspaper headlines and quiet conversations in lyceum halls. The first faint voices asking whether the slaughter has gone too far. You walk the streets of what was once the whaling capital of the world. Past grand mansions, now boarding houses. Past rope walk has turned to tenements in a small natural history society meeting room. A handful of people, scientists, former captains, even a few widows gather to hear a lecture on the decline of the bowhead in the Arctic charts on. The wall shows shrinking grounds. Fewer ships returning full. Someone proposes a closed season. Just a few years to let stocks recover. The idea feels radical and timid at once. The mainstream milestone everyone points to. The beginning of organized whale conservation in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as commercial whaling waned in America. A mix of practical economics and emerging sentiment led to the first protective measures in 1903. The North Pacific Fur Seal Convention indirectly helped whales by restricting pelagic hunting methods. By the 1920s, naturalists like Roy Chapman Andrews were documenting depleted populations and calling for sanctuaries. The idea that whales might need saving, not just exploiting, was taking root slowly, unevenly, but undeniably. You attend a public talk in Boston where a young biologist projects glass slides of flensed carcasses on beaches in the Azores, still hunted by open-boat whalers using old Yankee methods. The audience murmurs, some in disgust, some in nostalgia. A woman in the front row, wearing a hat trimmed with artificial flowers instead of feathers, asks whether anything can be done internationally. The speaker shrugs. Nations guard their rights to the open sea like gold, but the question hangs in the air. Persistent. Here's the quietly charming detail that always brings a small smile. Some of the earliest conservation efforts were funded by former whaling fortunes, oil barons who made millions on blubber turned philanthropists, endowing museums and research societies that began studying live whales instead of dead ones. The new Bedford Whaling Museum itself, founded in 1903, started collecting not just harpoons, but logbooks pleading for restraint, irony wrapped in good intentions. Like a gift you didn't expect. You spend an afternoon in a small coastal sanctuary, nothing official yet. Just a stretch of beach where local fishermen agree not to harass gray whales migrating past. You watch from the dunes as mothers and calves roll in the surf, close enough to see barnacles and old harpoon scars. Children from the nearby village sit beside you, wide-eyed, asking if the whales are really as big as ships. No one shushes them or talks about oil yields. The mood is wonder, not inventory. Later, you read a newspaper editorial arguing that whales, having provided light and industry for centuries, deserve a rest now that petroleum has taken over. The writer calls them retired veterans of human progress. Some readers scoff, sentimental nonsense, they say, but others clip the piece and save its seeds planted. Historians still debate how much these early stirrings actually slowed the hunt. Commercial whaling continued strong in Norway and Britain with modern steamships and explosive harpoons, and factory ships would soon turn the Antarctic into an abattoir. American efforts were modest, more moral gesture than enforceable law. Yet something cultural shifted. Whales began appearing in children's books as gentle giants, not monsters. Aquariums displayed porpoises doing tricks, proving cetaceans could learn and play. The old fear and greed softened at the edges. You walk a beach at twilight, the same Pacific coast your ancient ancestors knew, but now with boardwalks and bathhouses. A gray whale breaches far out, full body clearing the water in slow motion, then crashes back with a boom that echoes like distant thunder. A small crowd applauds without thinking, the way they might for fireworks. No one reaches for a harpoon. The moment feels like a quiet apology across generations. Evening deepens. And you sit on a driftwood log watching bioluminescence sparkle in each breaking wave. The air smells of kelp and wood smoke from nearby cottages somewhere along this coast. Maka-H elders still tell stories of respectful hunts, while younger ones learn new words like endangered and moratorium. The conversation between humans and whales, strained for so long, begins to change tone, less taking, more listening. A soft wind rises, carrying the salt scent you've known in every era. You pull your coat closer and feel the long thread of misunderstanding loosen. Just a little, not fixed, not forgiven, but acknowledged. The whales keep migrating, hearts beating slow and steady beneath miles of water. Humans keep watching from shore, hearts learning new rhythms. Sleep drifts in on the tide tonight. Gentle as moonlit foam, you lean back against the log, letting the rhythmic hush of waves smooth every sharp edge of the day. Stars prick out one by one, familiar guides for creatures on land and sea alike. The breach you witnessed replays behind your closed eyes. Graceful, unnecessary, pure joy. You let the cool sand cradle you. Let the ocean's endless breathing match your own. The story isn't over. New chapters wait, with factory ships and international treaties and harder choices ahead. But here, in this quiet dawn of caring, something small and hopeful takes root. And as the last light fades to indigo, you slip deeper, carried on the same ancient current that has always moved between species, now edged with wonder instead of want, with listening instead of taking. The night wraps you soft and safe, and you drift into dreams where whales surface beside silent boats, curious eyes meeting curious eyes. No irons flying, no lines running, just shared breath in the vast, forgiving dark. The quiet lecture halls and protected beaches of the early century fade into brighter sunlight and louder voices. You find yourself standing on a California cliff one spring afternoon in 1970. Wind whipping your hair as a small crowd gathers below on the sand. Hand-painted signs bob in the breeze. Save the whales. Listen to their song. Stop the slaughter. Someone strums a guitar, singing a new folk tune about oceans crying. A gray whale breaches far out, tail slapping the water like applause. And the crowd cheers as if the animal understands. This is the moment the tide truly turns. Everyone knows the spark. The Save the Whales movement of the 1970s became the first truly global environmental campaign, fueled by young activists, musicians, and scientists armed with new recordings of humpback songs. Protests outside Soviet and Japanese embassies, rainbow-painted boats chasing factory ships, bumper stickers on VW buses from coast to coast. By 1970, to the United Nations called for a 10-year moratorium on commercial whaling. And in 1980, to the International Whaling Commission finally voted ineffective. 1986. America led the charge, banning imports of whale products and threatening trade sanctions against nations that kept hunting. You join a beachside rally near Big Sur, barefoot in the sand, passing a joint or a thermos of tea depending on who's beside you. A young woman with flowers in her hair hands you a flyer showing a harpooned whale. Blood clouding the water, the image stings, but it works nearby. A marine biologist plays a tape through tinny speakers. Low, haunting moans and high ethereal whistles that rise and fall like lonely wind. Humpback songs, recorded just a few years earlier off Bermuda. The crowd falls silent, listening. Someone whispers, "They ray talking to each other." Another says, "Maybe they ray singing about us." Here's the delightful little detail that always brings soft laughter. One of the most powerful weapons in the entire movement was a record album. In 1970, biologist Roger Payne released songs of the humpback whale, which sold hundreds of thousands of copies and got played everywhere: radio stations, college dorms, even Congress. National Geographic included a flexi disc in an issue that reached millions. People who'd never seen a whale in person suddenly felt connected, lying on living room floors with headphones on, letting those strange, beautiful sounds wash over them. Music is activism, peaceful, persistent, impossible to ignore. You spend a weekend on a Greenpeace boat, small, scrappy, painted with doves and rainbows shadowing a Soviet factory fleet off the California coast. The whalers use explosive harpoons and process everything. At sea, no beaches or try works anymore. Just efficient disassembly lines below decks. Your crew motors between the catcher boats and the massive processing ship, holding signs, broadcasting messages, sometimes positioning yourselves in inflatable Zodiac-S directly in the line of fire. It's dangerous. But no one shoots. The harpooners hesitate. Cameras roll, and the footage airs on evening news across America. Public opinion shifts faster than any law could. Later, back on shore, you attend a benefit concert in Golden Gate Park. Crosby, Stills, Nash Young play a new song inspired by the recordings. Joan Baez leads the crowd in an old, spiritual, voices rising together over the fog rolling in. Candles flicker in paper cups. Someone passes out, buttons shaped like whale tails. You pin one to your jacket and feel part of something larger than any single voyage or protest. Historians still argue about how much the cultural wave actually drove policy versus economic realities. Factory whaling was becoming unprofitable anyway, with fewer whales and cheaper synthetic alternatives to baleen and oil. But no one disputes the emotional power. For the first time, whales were seen as fellow sentient beings with language, culture, family bonds. The old image of Moby Dick the monster gave way to gentle singers deserving protection. You walk the beach at dusk, the rally winding down. Campfires dot the sand, guitars still strumming softly out in the darkening water. More spouts catch the last light. Grays heading north to feed in the Arctic summer. A mother and calf pass close, spy hopping as if curious about the tiny figures on shore. No one shouts or waves harpoons. Instead, people stand quietly, some with hands over hearts, watching until the pair sound and vanish. The wind carries wood smoke and salt, and the faint echo of that recorded song someone is still playing. On a portable speaker, you sit on a piece of driftwood, knees drawn up, feeling the cool sand under your palms. The misunderstanding that lasted 1,000 years begins to unravel here. Not completely, not perfectly, but visibly. Nations still argue in conference rooms. Some still hunt under loopholes. But the global chorus of ordinary voices has grown too loud to ignore. Stars come out over the Pacific, bright and close. You think about light again, once taken from blubber, now given back in the form of awareness. The whales keep singing, migrating, living their slow, immense lives. Humans, for once, are mostly listening. Sleep drifts in on the outgoing tide tonight, soft as guitar strings settling. You lie back on the sand, blanket pulled high, letting the distant surf and occasional whale breath match your own slowing rhythm. The fire beside you crackles low, embers glowing like small try works that harm nothing. Voices fade to murmurs, then to silence. You close your eyes and feel the vast conversation shift, less about taking, more about sharing space. The ocean breathes steady and patient, holding room for both species, and you let that shared breath carry you under, deep into dreams where songs rise from blue depths and meet human voices halfway, weaving together in a harmony that feels, for the first time in centuries, almost like understanding. The protest signs and guitar strings fade into the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft click of projectors. You find yourself seated in a university lecture hall sometime in the 1980s or 1990s, surrounded by students in flannel shirts and jeans, notebooks open on their laps. On the screen behind the professor, a grainy underwater video plays, a humpback whale twisting slowly in blue light, Pectoral fins spread like wings. Throat pleats expanding as it lunges through a cloud of krill. The room is quiet except for the low thrum of the whale's recorded calls echoing through the speakers. No one doodles or checks watches, everyone just watches. This is the era when science finally catches up to sentiment. Everyone recognizes the shift. Beginning in the late 20th century, marine biologists armed with new tools, hydrophones, satellite tags, DNA sampling, even underwater cameras began revealing whales as far more complex than anyone had assumed. Intelligence, culture, individual personalities, long-term memory, even dialects in their songs. The old view of them as silent, instinct-driven giants crumbled under the weight of evidence. You join a research cruise out of Gloucester or Woods Hole. The boat small and steady, deck cluttered with acoustic arrays and tagging gear. The team is mixed: veteran oceanographers, grad students, even a few former whalers turned naturalists. They deploy hydrophones over the side, listening for the deep clicks of sperm whales hunting squid miles below when a pod surfaces nearby. The boat idles quietly, no chase, no irons, just binoculars and cameras. A young researcher leans over the rail, whispering identifiers. That's Salt, the big female with the white patch on her dorsal. She has been sighted here every summer since '87. Here's the quietly astonishing detail that still makes people pause. Scientists discovered that humpback whale songs evolve over time, like hit singles spreading across an ocean-wide top 40 chart. Males in one region introduce new phrases, and within a year or two, whales thousands of miles away are singing the updated version. No one teaches it. It just spreads. A cultural tradition passed without words. Imagine humans adopting a new pop song from Hawaii to Australia in months. With no radio or internet, whales do it with sound alone. You spend days on calm water, recording feeding calls, short, sharp whoops that coordinate bubble net hunting in southeast Alaska. A group of 15 humpbacks works together. Some dive deep to herd herring into a tight ball. Others blow curtains of bubbles to trap them. Then all surge upward in perfect synchro. NY. Mouths agape, the coordination is flawless. Roles rotating fairly over hours. One researcher jokes that they rave better at teamwork than most academic departments. No one disagrees. Later, in a lab back on shore, you watch geneticists swab skin samples sloughed off during breaches. The DNA reveals family trees stretching decades. Grandmothers traveling with daughters and grandcalves. Matrilineal clans sharing migration routes and feeding techniques learned over generations. Sperm whale clans even have distinct vocal dialects, click patterns called codas that identify them, like accents. Babies babble experimental clicks before settling into the family pattern culture. Plain and simple. Historians and biologists still debate how much of this sophistication was suspected earlier. Melville wrote about whale societies. Indigenous stories always treated them as persons, but the hard data only arrived with modern technology. Some argue the revelations came just in time to bolster the moratorium. Others say they deepened public commitment long after the ban was in place. Either way, the image shifted permanently. Whales weren't resources or monsters, they were mind swimming. You attend a conference where a presenter plays a recording of a lone humpback singing off Maui, then overlays it with the same whale's song from 10 years earlier. The changes are obvious: new themes, dropped phrases, rhythmic shifts. The audience leans forward, rapt. Someone asks if the songs have meaning. The researcher shrugs. We don't know the lyrics, but we know they matter. Laughter ripples, soft and respectful. One evening on the cruise, the team gathers on deck under a star-thick sky. A pod of orcas passes close, black fins slicing moonlight. The hydrophone picks up their whistles and pulse calls. Family chatter, hunting coordination, maybe just social noise. A grad student whispers, They know we ray here, they always detour a little to look. Sure enough, one spy hops. Eye level with the rail, scanning faces before slipping back under. No fear, no aggression, just curiosity returned. You lean against the cabin wall, feeling the boat rock gentle on a long swell. The air smells of salt and diesel and the faint sweetness of plankton blooms. Somewhere below, the recorded songs play on loop in the lab, low and haunting. You think about misunderstanding again. How humans spent centuries projecting fear or greed onto these animals, never imagining the richness hidden in silence. Sleep comes easy tonight. The berth narrow but familiar, the boat's engine thrum is steady, matching the slow heartbeat you now know powers those massive bodies. In dreams you dive deep, weightless, surrounded by clicking codas and singing phrases that shift and evolve around you like living architecture. No translation needed, just presence, shared in the blue dark. You surface gently in the dream, breath matching breath with a curious humpback that hangs vertical beside you. One enormous eye reflecting starlight. No words, no tools, no history of harm between you. Just recognition. The whale tilts slightly, pectoral fin waving slow like a greeting, then turns and glides away into deeper blue. The research boat rocks on, lights dim to avoid disturbing night migration. You drift deeper into sleep, carried on recorded songs that loop soft through bulkheads, ancient voices finally being heard. Not for what they can give, but for who they are. The long conversation continues, clearer now, fuller of wonder than want. And as the stars will overhead, you let the slow rhythm of waves and whale breath pull you all the way under, into a quiet so complete it feels like understanding at last. The soft clicks and haunting songs from the research lab fade into a deeper, more mechanical hum. You find yourself standing on the bridge of a modern naval destroyer, sometime in the early 2000s. The deck vibrating faintly under your feet as the ship steams through the Bahamas or perhaps off Southern California. The air is warm, laced with diesel and salt, and the sea stretches flat and glassy under a high sun below. Sonar operators hunch over green glowing screens, headsets clamped tight, listening for submarine echoes in the deep sound channel. But today something else shows up, massive, biological, moving fast through the water column. This is where old habits meet new consequences. Everyone knows the headline story. Starting in the 1980s and 1990s, reports began surfacing of whales stranding in unusual numbers during naval exercises using powerful mid-frequency active sonar. The loud pulses designed to detect quiet submarines disoriented cetaceans, causing them to flee upward too quickly, triggering decompression sickness. Or the Ben's-beaked whales especially, deep divers accustomed to silent hunting, seem most vulnerable. Autopsies revealed bleeding in ears and brains, gas bubbles in tissues. The ocean, once a battlefield only for whalers, had become one for sound. You watch from the bridge wing as a helicopter dips a sono buoy into the water ahead. The pilot's voice crackles over the intercom. Multiple biologic contacts. Bearing 090. Depth varying. The captain nods. Calm but attentive. Protocol now requires a slowdown or course change if marine mammals are spotted within a certain range. Lookouts with big binoculars scan the surface constantly. Its progress awkward, imperfect, but real, born from lawsuits, congressional hearings, and heartbreaking photos of stranded pods on beaches. Here's the oddly poignant detail that always quiets a room. Some stranded whales were found with Navy sonar pings literally recorded in their ear bones, like tree rings preserving the exact frequency and timing of the exposure. Researchers slice thin sections of the bone under microscopes and read the damage the way paleontologists read ancient climates. Sound made visible, harm made undeniable. Imagine carrying the echo of a mistake in your very skeleton. You join a mitigation team on a smaller vessel shadowing the exercise. They deploy acoustic monitors and watch for signs sudden changes in dive patterns. Panicked surfacing S. Groups scattering when a pod of pilot whales appears. Milling confused near the sonar dome. The destroyer shuts down transmission without debate. The bridge goes quiet except for normal ship noises. You feel the collective exhale. Minutes later the whales regroup and dive normally, vanishing into blue. Small victory, but it adds up. Later, in a wardroom briefing, a marine mammal observer shows satellite tags tracking sperm whales avoiding sonar testing zones by hundreds of miles. The maps look like detour signs around invisible storms. Navy scientists, uniformed officers with PhDs present new ramp-up procedures. Starting sonar soft and gradually increasing volume so animals have time to leave. Some ships even carry passive acoustic arrays to listen for whale calls before pinging, and all the mood is pragmatic, not defensive. Everyone in the room knows the ocean is shared now, whether they like it or not. Historians and advocates still debate how much voluntary change came from the military versus court orders. Environmental groups sued successfully in the early 2000s, forcing environmental impact statements and restricted zones. The Supreme Court weighed national security against whale safety and split the difference. Progress crawled forward in legal inches, but it moved today. Most navies worldwide have similar guidelines: quieting ships, seasonal shutdowns in migration corridors, research partnerships to understand better. You spend a sunset on the fantail, watching flying fish skim away from the bow wave. The sonar is off for the evening, and the sea feels softer, almost conspiratorial. Far off, a sperm whale clicks steadily, deep, rhythmic, hunting squid in darkness. No human light reaches. The sound carries through the hull faintly, picked up by passive sensors. Someone in the lab downstairs records it for the database that helps map safe zones next year. The stars come out sharp over an empty horizon. You think about noise, how humans filled the ocean with it long after harpoons stopped flying. Engine propellers, seismic air guns for oil surveys, shipping lanes roaring like highways. Whales evolved in a world of natural quiet. Storms, ice cracking, their own voices traveling hundreds of miles. Now they navigate a constant hum, raising their calls louder in some places just to be heard, like city dwellers shouting over traffic. Yet adaptation flickers here. To some populations shift migration timing to avoid busy seasons. Others learn to ignore certain frequencies. Resilience, stubborn as always. You lean against the rail, letting warm winds smooth the day's tension. The ship steams slow now. Consider it in the distance. A humpback breaches once, full body clear of the water, then again playful, unhurried. No one on deck cheers or points binoculars aggressively. They just watch. Quiet smiles. The old reflex to pursue has softened into something closer to courtesy. Sleep settles gentle tonight, the berth cool and steady. The ship's engines thrown low, respectful. In dreams you sink deep, weightless, surrounded by silent water, suddenly shattered by bright pings that scatter families in panic. But then, the noise fades, deliberate and slow, and the pods regroup, calls weaving together again like threads finding their pattern. You surface in the dream beside a curious beaked whale, scarred but calm. Eye reflecting moonlight, it clicks once soft, questioning, then turns and glides away into safe darkness. No harm tonight, no confusion. The destroyer rocks on. Lights dim to avoid disorienting night migrants. You drift deeper into sleep, carried on the restored quiet. The careful hush that wasn't there before. The long conversation continues, still imperfect, still learning volume control, but listening now in both directions. And as the stars hold steady overhead, you let the slow rhythm of cautious engines and distant whale clicks pull you all the way under. into a piece as fragile and hopeful as the silence between sounds. The careful hush of sonar-free zones fades into the bright chatter of tourists and the snap of camera shutters. You find yourself standing on the bow of a sleek whale-watching catamaran off Cape Cod. One summer morning in the present day, say. A gentle July day with just enough breeze to keep the gulls wheeling overhead. The boat is packed, but comfortable. Families in sun hats. Couples sharing binoculars. A naturalist at the microphone narrating in a calm, enthusiastic voice. Diesel engines thrum low as the captain cuts speed in the Stellwagen Bank. Feeding grounds. Everyone leans forward, scanning the flat blue for the telltale spout. This is the new bargain. Everyone knows the broad stroke. Whale watching exploded into a multi-billion-dollar global industry starting in the 1970s and 1980s. First in places like Massachusetts, California, and Hawaii by the 1990s. Millions of people a year were paying to see live whales instead of buying products from dead ones in New England alone. Towns once built on blubber now thrive on binoculars and telephoto lenses. Harpoons rusted in museums. Spotting scopes sell out in gift shops. You grip the rail as the naturalist points starboard. 3 o'clock humpback blow. A tall, bushy spout hangs in the air, followed by the slow arch of a broad black back. Barnacles glinting like constellations. The whale flukes high, deeply notched. Yeek as a fingerprint and dives. Cameras click in a happy frenzy. A child beside you gasps. It's waving goodbye. The naturalist smiles and explains fluke up dives mean a longer time down. Maybe 10 minutes. The deck settles into patient waiting. Everyone content just to be here. Here's the quietly amusing detail that always earns soft chuckles on these boats. Many of the best whale watching spots today are the exact same grounds Yankee whalers marked on secret charts to centuries ago. Stellwagen Bank. Jeffrey S. Ledge. The Great South Channel places once crowded with tri-works smoke are now dotted with pleasure craft and research buoys. The whales never left. Humans just changed what they came for. Some captains even navigate by old logbook coordinates, joking that their great-great-grandfathers would be baffled to see the family business still chasing the same animals, only now with sunscreen instead of lances. You watch a mother and calf surface close off the port bow, close enough to hear the wet rush of breath and smell the faint shrimp tang of exhales. The calf rolls playfully, pectoral fins slapping the water like applause. Passengers ooh in unison. The naturalist lowers her voice. That's a female named Salt and her newest calf. She has been coming here every summer since the 1970s. Some of you might have seen her grandmother. Continuity made visible. No one feels the need to own or take. Seeing is enough. The boat drifts with engines in neutral. Regulations keeping a respectful 100 yards away. Guidelines are strict now. Slow speeds in whale areas. No chasing. No surrounding pods. Most companies follow them gladly. Happy whales linger longer. And lingering whales mean happy customers who tip well and leave 5-star reviews. Economics finally aligned with ethics. Later, a trio of humpbacks begins bubble net feeding just beyond the bow. One dives deep to blow a spiral of bubbles. Others circle to tighten the net. Then all lunge together in a coordinated explosion of open mouths and white water. Seabirds dive into the chaos for escaping fish. The deck erupts in cheers. Someone starts clapping. And soon everyone joins, applauding the whales like performers who just nailed a difficult routine. The naturalist laughs over the mick. They've been doing this for thousands of years. We raise the new audience. Historians and economists still debate how much whale watching truly replaced lost whaling revenue. Inform reports versus simply adding a new layer of tourism. Some coastal communities in Iceland and Norway kept limited hunts while growing huge watching industries side by side. Others, like Massachusetts or Baja California, went all in on ecotourism and never looked back either way. Millions of people now meet whales face to face every year, carrying home photos and stories instead of oil or meat. You spend the ride back toward Provincetown or Boston with wind in your hair, replaying the morning in quiet wonder. The boat passes old lighthouses that once guided whalers home, heavy with barrels. Now they guide day trippers back full of memories. On the upper deck, a musician plays acoustic guitar soft covers of 70s protest songs. The ones that helped save these animals. Passengers sing along gently, voices blending with gulls and waves. The harbor approaches. Massive pleasure yachts glinting in late light. You think about pursuit again. How it once meant chase and capture now means careful approach and respectful retreat. The misunderstanding softens further here, not erased, but transformed. Whales still bear scars from old irons and new propellers, but they also surface beside boats full of people who paid just to look. Evening settles as you step onto the dock. Legs wobbly with sea motion. Gift shops sell plush whales, scrimshaw-style jewelry made from resin, postcards of breaching humpbacks. No one sells oil or baleen anymore. You buy a coffee and sit on a bench watching the catamaran tie up, crew waving to the next group already boarding for the sunset trip. Out in the bay, a final spout catches the low sun silver plume against rose sky before the whale sounds for the night. You feel the long arc of the story in that single breath, from prehistoric respect to colonial greed, from industrial frenzy to protective distance, and now to this careful closeness. Not perfect harmony, but shared space. Sleep drifts in on the evening tide tonight, soft as gull cries fading overhead. You walk the wharf slowly, letting salt wind cool sun-warmed skin. The town lights flicker on one by one, modern electric. No whale oil needed. Somewhere below the harbor, the humpbacks rest or feed or sing in frequencies too low for human ears, but not for human hearts anymore. You settle onto a bench, close your eyes, and feel the gentle rock of the sea still in your body. In dreams you ride the bow wave again, closer this time. Eye to enormous eye with a curious calf who mirrors your wonder. No barrier, no fear, just mutual recognition in bright water. The boat engines idle in the distance. Patient and low, you let the rhythmic hush of waves against pilings pull you under, deep into a sleep as open and welcoming as the ocean these animals still call home. The conversation continues, quieter now, kinder, full of shared breath and careful distance. And as the last light slips below the horizon, you drift completely, carried on the same ancient current that brings whales and watchers together season after season, year after year, in a dance finally more about seeing than taking. The cheerful chatter of whale watchers and the snap of camera shutters fade into a quieter, more ominous sound. The low groan of heavy line under strain and the distant thud of a propeller striking something solid. You find yourself standing on a windswept beach in North Carolina or Massachusetts. Present day. Part of a small crowd gathered at dawn around a massive shape grounded on the sand. A young humpback, barely adolescent, lies on its side, breathing shallow and fast. Thick fishing rope cuts deep into its tailstock, wrapped multiple times. Trailing ghost gear, abandoned nets and lines drifting the ocean like invisible snares. The whales, flukes are swollen, scarred, the peduncle raw from months, maybe years, of dragging the weight. This is the shadow side of the happy ending. Everyone knows the grim statistic. Entanglement in fishing gear and plastic debris, along with ship strikes and ocean noise, remain the leading human-caused threats to whales even after the end of commercial whaling. Hundreds of large whales are entangled every year along the U.S. east and west coasts alone. North Atlantic right whales most critically, with fewer than 350 left, each known individual monitored like an endangered family member. You join a trained response team in neoprene suits, Working under NOAA permits and on light, the whale is still alive. I open and aware. Blowhole clear enough to breathe. The team leader speaks softly, directing cutters to the least stressful positions. Satellite tags and drones hover overhead, relaying images to veterinarians on shore. You help hold a tarp to shade the animal's skin from sun, pouring seawater gently over the back to keep it cool. The whale exhales a wet, resigned whoosh that sprays mist across your face. At DOESNT thrash, it seems to understand help has arrived. Or perhaps it is simply exhausted. Here's the heartbreaking, but oddly hopeful detail that always catches people off guard. Some entangled whales have been documented waiting calmly near rescue boats, almost presenting the tangled area as if asking for assistance. Researchers have footage of right whales slowing alongside vessels, lifting flukes or pectorals to expose rope cuts, holding position for hours while teams work. No one claims they understand human intent perfectly, but the cooperation feels deliberate, earned through decades of careful intervention, trust built one disentanglement at a time. You watch as skilled cutters use long poles with curved blades to slice through braided polypropylene line. Inch by tension inch, each freed wrap releases a little more blood flow. The swollen tissue begins to pink up. Instead of purple, buoys are attached to trailing gear so it can be tracked and removed later. After 4 hours, the whale is mostly free. Some deep cuts remain, but nothing life-threatening. If infection stays away, the team backs off. Boats idling at a distance on the rising tide. The humpback rights itself slowly, rests a moment, then swims deliberately toward deeper water. It breaches once half-hearted, more like a stretch before sounding. The beach crowd exhales together, some wiping tears. Later, you walk the rack line where the cut gear lies in coils like defeated snakes. Volunteers sort it for recycling or analysis. Crab pot lines, gill nets, balloon ribbons, even a shredded Mylar birthday balloon still reading happy 40th. Every piece tells a small story of carelessness, yet response networks now span the Atlantic and Pacific hotlines. Train teams on call 24/7. Apps for mariners to report sightings. Success rates climb each decade. Historians and conservationists still debate how much these modern threats offset the gains from ending commercial hunting. Some models predict North Atlantic right whales could recover in decades if entanglements and ship strikes drop 60 to 80%. Others warn that climate-driven prey shifts might keep them precarious for centuries. The science is sobering, but the effort is relentless. You spend the evening at a debrief in a local fire hall. Sandwiches and coffee passed around. Photos from the drone show the whale's unique scar patterns, now added to the catalog so researchers can track healing and survival. Someone pulls up a match. This juvenile was born 3 years ago to a mother named Dragon. Both have been sighted healthy since. Quiet cheers go up. Stories are shared of past rescues. A right whale calf freed after months of dragging gear, now an adult with her own calf. A humpback that approached a research boat years after disentanglement, seemingly to show off healed flukes. Outside, the tide has turned again, erasing footprints and drag marks from the sand. You walk the beach alone under a rising moon. The water glows faintly with bioluminescence stirred by gentle waves far out. A single spout catches silver light. Maybe the same whale, maybe another. Steady, unhurried, the ocean keeps its ancient rhythm, absorbing both harm and healing. You think about entanglement as the newest chapter in the long misunderstanding. Not deliberate cruelty like harpoons, but careless byproducts of feeding ourselves and celebrating milestones. Lines set for lobster, nets for cod, plastics for convenience, all drifting into paths whales have swum for millennia. The harm is quieter, slower, harder to see from deck level. Yet response is quicker now to phones in pockets, satellites overhead, networks of ordinary people ready to drop everything when the call comes. The conversation evolves. Again, less about stopping an industry, more about adjusting daily habits. Slower ships in migration lanes, rope-less fishing gear trials, biodegradable plastics, better trash management ashore. Sleep drifts in on cool night air tonight. Carrying the faint iodine scent of low tide, you sit on a piece of driftwood, knees drawn up, watching moonlight ripple across the water somewhere beneath that silver path. Scarred flukes propel a young whale toward deeper water. Lighter now. Blood flowing free. Healing takes time, but it begins. You lean back, letting sand cradle your weight. Stars wheel overhead, the same ones your ancestors navigated by, the same ones whales may use on cloudy migrations. The breach you saw earlier replays in memory, tentative, then strong, a small refusal to give up. The waves hush in and out. Steady and patient, you match your breath to them. Slow and deliberate. In dreams you swim alongside the freed juvenile, feeling the water part clean around healed tissue. No drag, no pain. The calf rolls once, playful again, then dives deep where lines rarely reach. The beach holds you gentle. Moonlight soft on your face, you let the rhythmic pull of tide and distant spouts carry you under, deep into a sleep as restorative as the one that whale is claiming tonight. Scarred, but swimming. Wary but willing to surface near. Careful hands when needed. The long thread of misunderstanding phrase, but doesn't break. It simply changes texture. Rougher in places, smoother in others. Still connecting species across centuries of shared ocean, and you drift completely, held in that quiet tension, dreaming of clearer water ahead. The cut ropes and healed scars from the disentanglement beach drift away on a warmer current, carrying you inland to galleries, concert halls, and quiet living rooms across contemporary America. You find yourself standing in a crowded art opening in Brooklyn or maybe Los Angeles. Soft lighting spilling over massive canvases that swirl with blues deeper than any CUV sail. One painting shows a humpback breaching against a city skyline, tail flukes echoing the curve of a suspension bridge. Another abstracts whale song into waves of color that seem to vibrate if you stare long enough. People sip wine and talk in low voices about migration, memory, extinction, hope. This is how whales live in the American imagination now. Everyone recognizes the icons. The rainbow-tailed Save the Whales posters from the 1970s still reprinted on t-shirts. The orca from Free Willy that made a generation cry in theaters. The Spotify playlist titled Whale Sounds for Sleep that rack up millions of streams. Whales have become shorthand for wilderness, wisdom, environmental conscience, sometimes all at once. They show up in children's books as gentle teachers, in luxury ads as symbols of vastness, in protest art as victims or survivors depending on the message. You wander through a sound installation in a darkened room. Hydrophone recordings slowed and layered until humpback moans become cello-like drones. Sperm whale clicks turn into metallic rain. Visitors sit on the floor, eyes closed, letting the sound wash over them like tide. One piece loops a single gray whale call with ocean waves and distant traffic. Nature and human noise braided together, impossible to separate. No one rushes through. The gallery guard even turns his phone to silent. Here's the quietly delightful detail that always makes people grin. Whales have infiltrated American pop music in ways no one predicted. Paul Winter's saxophone duets with recorded humpbacks in the 1970s led to samples in everything from new age albums to hip-hop beats. Judy Collins, Crosby, Stills Nash. Even country artists have name-checked them. One recent indie hit layers a viral TikTok of a singing beluga over lo-fi beats and went platinum. Kids who've never seen an ocean no whale song as bedtime ambience, streamed alongside rain sounds and crackling fireplaces. The giants have gone viral, one ambient track at a time. You attend an outdoor screening in a Seattle park. Fantastic fungi or my octopus teacher? No. Tonight it's a new documentary about North Atlantic right whales. Each individual named and known families spread blankets. Pass popcorn when a mother named Snow Cone appears on screen entangled. Emaciated. Still carrying a calf, the audience goes still when the calf survives against odds. Someone starts clapping and the whole park joins in strangers hug. The credits roll over whale song mixed with a string quartet. And no one moves until the last note fades. Later, you flip through a coffee table book in a Boston bookstore. Stunning drone photos of bowheads surfacing in Arctic leads. Orcas hunting seals off Patagonia. Blue whales lunch feeding in the Gulf of California. The captions quote indigenous elders, poets, scientists, even a former whaling captain's journal from 1850 regretting the waste. The images are so sharp you can see individual barnacles, old scars, even droplets frozen mid-air from a breach. Readers linger, tracing flukes with fingertips as if touching living skin. Historians and cultural critics still debate how deeply this affection runs versus how performative it can be. Bumper stickers on SUVs that never slow down in whale zones. Plush toys bought alongside single-use plastic. Some call it charismatic megafauna syndrome. We save the cute or majestic while ignoring smaller, uglier species. Others argue whales earn their spotlight by surviving us, becoming living proof that change is possible. Either way, they've woven themselves into the national story, symbols of what we almost lost and might still protect. You visit a school in Maine where third graders present projects on local humpbacks. One girl shows a drawing of salt with all her known calves listed like a family tree. A boy plays a recording he made from a kayak. Hydrophone porpoises chattering like birds. The teacher beams. They rate growing up thinking whales are neighbors, not myths. Outside the window, Casco Bay glitters. And sure enough, a finback spouts far out, tall as a sail. Evening finds you at a folk concert in a small venue, maybe the Passim in Cambridge or the Freight Salvage in Berkeley. The singer dedicates a new song to the gray whales migrating past. Right now, lyrics about long journeys, scarred bodies, stubborn hope. The room sings the chorus back, voices soft but sure. You close your eyes and feel the thread again. From prehistoric respect to industrial frenzy, from protest to policy, and now to this art carrying memory forward, keeping the conversation alive in hearts that never held a harpoon. You walk home under city lights that no longer burn. Whale oil billboards flash environmental appeals. A mural on a brick wall shows a blue whale swimming through stars. Your phone buzzes with a notification. Another live feed from a research buoy playing real-time whale song. You plug in earbuds for a block, letting the low moans overlay traffic and laughter and distant sirens. The misunderstanding isn't gone, far from it, but it's layered now with something richer. That doesn't demand possession. Grief that motivates change. Wonder that needs no product. Whales echo through American culture the way they echo through the sea. Present. Persistent. Impossible to ignore. Sleep settles soft and familiar tonight. City sounds blending with remembered ocean. You lie back, earbuds still in, letting a recorded bowhead song deep, slow, older than cities fill the room. In dreams you float through galleries of light and sound, paintings breathing, songs taking shape, children's drawings coming alive with real flukes and spouts. The whale from the mural glides past your window, silent and immense, carrying every era on its barnacled back. It doesn't look back, but you feel seen anyway. The long story continues, woven now into music, image, daily imagination. Not resolved, not perfect, but alive in 1,000 quiet ways. You drift deeper, carried on that shared resonance, into a sleep as vast and humming as culture itself, full of echoes, full of possibility, full of gentle Persistent song. The gallery lights and concert echoes soften into the steady drum of rain on cedar shingles and the low murmur of voices speaking languages older than English. You find yourself walking a muddy path along the coast of Vancouver Island or southeast Alaska. Present day but timeless in feel, tall cedars dripping. Eagle cries overhead. The smell of wood smoke and low tide thick in the air. Ahead, a modern longhouse glows from within, its painted front showing a whale emerging from the waves. Thunderbird above. Wolf and raven flanking, people gather for a feast. A ceremony. A simple community meal, doors open to anyone who comes respectfully. This is the return, everyone knows the broad arc. After decades of forced assimilation, residential schools, and bans on potlatches and traditional hunting, many indigenous nations along the northwest coast are reviving their ancient relationships with whales through art, ceremony, language revitalization, and, in some cases, carefully regulated hunts. The Maca-H in Washington state resumed whaling in 1999, after a 70-year hiatus, taking one gray whale under strict federal oversight. The Nuuc-H on Vancouver Island continue pushing for similar rights. Others focus on stewardship, monitoring populations, cleaning beaches, teaching youth the old songs and stories. You step inside the longhouse, removing shoes at the door. The space is warm. Cedar benches lining the walls. Fire crackling in the center pit. Elders in woven cedar bark hats sit at the head. Younger ones serve salmon and/or lican grease. Children chase each other quietly around the edges. On the walls, new carvings and weavings show whales alongside contemporary images. Satellite tags, research boats, oil spill response gear. Tradition and science braided together without contradiction. Here's the quietly powerful detail that always brings a soft nod of recognition. Many revived ceremonies now include thanks not just for the whale as historical gift, but for its survival through the industrial era. Songs once sung only before hunts are adapted to welcome migrating pods in spring, acknowledging that the whales kept their side of the ancient agreement by returning each year even when humans forgot theirs. One in Nuuc-H prayer recorded recently thanks the whales for forgiving us our long silence. Imagine saying that aloud. Generation to generation accountability woven into gratitude. You sit on a bench near the fire, accepting a plate of smoked salmon and roasted potatoes. An elder tells a story in Nuuc-H, then translates loosely. A time when whales and humans could change places. When a chief's daughter married a whale chief and their children could swim or walk as needed, the kids listened, wide-eyed. Same as always. Later, a young woman in a modern hoodie with a traditional crest screen printed on it shows drone footage. On her phone, gray whales passing the village last week. Mothers and calves lingering in the bay like old friends. Checking in the room, leans in, murmuring approval. Outside, rain eases to mist. You walk down to the beach with a group of teenagers learning to carve paddles from yellow cedar. They point out old petroglyphs half hidden by moss. Whales, canoes, hunters carved thousands of years ago in the same rocky outcrop. As one boy traces a fluke outline with his finger and says quietly, "My grandpa says they race still here." Just under the water, no one laughs or corrects him. The tide is out, exposing barnacled rocks and tangled kelp farther down the shore. A research team in kayaks deploys a hydrophone, recording calls for a joint project with the nation's science serving stewardship. Historians and indigenous scholars still debate how much traditional whale hunting was truly sustainable versus cyclical, and how modern regulated hunts fit into recovery efforts. Some environmental groups oppose any resumption. Others support tribal sovereignty and cultural rights. Gray whale populations have rebounded to near pre-whaling numbers. But right whales and others remain precarious. The conversations are complex, respectful, ongoing, no easy slogans. You spend the evening around a beach fire, drums and singing rising soft against the surf. Someone plays a box drum carved like a whale's head. The songs are old, but new verses have been added about oil spills cleaned, about youth learning the canoe routes again, about hope that the whales will keep coming as long as respect is kept. Stars come out between clouds, and out in the strait a gray whale spouts once, twice steady, unhurried. The singers pause, listen, then continue as if in answer. Later, you help stack firewood for tomorrow's smokehouse. A girl maybe 10 years old asks if you've ever seen a whale up close. You tell her about the disentanglement on the East Coast, about whale watching off Cape Cod. She nods seriously, then says, "Here they come to see us." The confidence in her voice feels ancient and brand new at once. The fire settles to embers. You walk back up the path, boots squishing in mud. Cedar scent thick around you. The longhouse lights glow warm behind curtained windows. Somewhere inside, children are being tucked into bunk beds with stories of whale people and thunderbirds. Tomorrow there will be language classes, canoe practice, maybe a meeting about expanding marine protected areas. You pause at the edge of the forest, listening to waves hush against rocks. The whales keep their migration, slow and immense. The people here keep their songs, adapting but unbroken. The misunderstanding that began with strangers arriving in tall ships circles back towards something older: negotiation, respect, shared coast. Not perfect restoration, not naive romance, but living continuity. Sleep drifts in on cedar smoke and salt mist tonight, gentle as rain, easing. You settle into a guest cabin, window cracked to the night air. In dreams you paddle a cedar canoe alongside a gray whale, matching breath for stroke. No harpoons, no cameras, just parallel journeys along the same ancient route. The whale rolls once, I'm meeting yours across the narrow water, calm and knowing. The longhouse fire settles lower, voices fade to murmurs. You let the steady rhythm of surf and distant spouts pull you under, deep into a sleep as rooted and resilient as the cedars overhead. The conversation continues, older than nations, patient as tides, carried now by voices that never forgot how to listen. And as the mist thickens and stars hold steady, you drift completely, held in the shared breath of land and sea, past and present braided tight as cedar rope, strong enough to carry whatever comes next. The cedar smoke from the longhouse fire lingers in your clothes as you step onto a small research vessel, gliding through warming Arctic waters. Sometime in the near future, say, a calm summer day when the ice has pulled back farther than anyone remembers. The air is crisp, but strangely mild, carrying the clean bite of melting snow and the faint mineral scent of ancient ice finally giving way. Around you, the sea stretches open in patches of deep blue between shrinking floes. Bowhead whales surface nearby, massive black backs breaking the mirror calm water, spouts hanging long in the still air like slow breaths from the planet itself. This is the horizon we race sailing toward. Everyone senses the shift. Climate change is reshaping whale habitats faster than any harpoon ever could. Arctic species like bowheads and belugas gaining new feeding grounds as ice retreats, while southern populations face warmer waters pushing prey deeper or farther poleward. Gray whales shift migration timing. Humpbacks appear in places they haven't been seen for centuries, like the Mediterranean or off New York City. Satellites and acoustic buoys track it all, recording songs that change pitch with rising ocean temperatures. Migration routes bending like rivers, finding new paths. You stand on the bow with a mixed crew: Inuit hunters turned researchers, acoustic engineers from California, graduate students from Norway. They deployed drifting hydrophones that look like yellow torpedoes, listening for bowhead songs that can travel hundreds of miles in the now clearer water. One researcher, Points to the screen. Deep, low moans layered like organ music. Evolving in real time as the whales explore new submarine areas, they rewriting their atlas every season. She says quietly, no one jokes about it. Here's the quietly astonishing detail that always stills conversations. Scientists have begun using whale songs themselves to monitor ocean warming. Bowheads and fin whales produce calls so low and powerful they act like natural thermometers. Sound speed changes with temperature, so shifts in how far or fast a song travels reveal warming layers miles down. The whales are helping map the very changes affecting them. Unwitting partners in the research that might save them. Imagine relying on the voices of animals we once hunted to understand the crisis we created. You watch a mother bowhead and calf roll at the surface, her enormous head scarred from ice and old age. Some bowheads alive today were swimming these waters when Yankee whalers chased them in the 1800s. The calf, born just last year, nurses in lazy circles, oblivious to the fact that its world is already different. Drones overhead capture footage for population counts. Underwater gliders sample krill density. The data streams to servers ashore, feeding models that predict where protected areas should move next, where shipping lanes must slow, where offshore wind farms can rise without blocking migration corridors. Later, the team gathers in the galley over coffee and Bannock, an Inuit elder shares stories of summers when the ice never left, when whales sang closer to shore. A young scientist shows graphs of pH dropping, acidification threatening the tiny creatures at the base of the food chain. The conversation flows easily between languages and generations. No blame, just shared concern and shared work. They plan to tag a few more whales tomorrow with suction cup recorders that drop off harmlessly after days, collecting dive data and ambient sound. Every dataset refines the next season as protections. Historians and climate scientists still debate how quickly whales can adapt versus how fast the ocean is changing. Some species may thrive in new Arctic bounty. Others may starve as prey vanishes or competitors arrive. Bowheads, built for cold and patience, seem resilient so far. Right whales, already battered, face compounded threats from shifting calving grounds. The only certainty is motion, roots bending, songs shifting, populations shuffling like cards in a slow deck. You spend twilight on deck as the sun circles low without setting, painting the water gold and rose. A pot of beluga appears ghost white, chattering like birds curious about the boat they spy. Hop in unison, scanning faces, then dive under the hull with playful twists. Someone lowers a hydrophone. Their whistles and clicks fill the speakers. Bright and busy, the elder smiles. They ray gossiping about us. Laughter ripples, soft and easy. Out farther, a bowhead breaches half its body clear of the water, slow and deliberate before crashing back in a plume that catches the midnight sun. The sound carries across the flat sea like distant thunder. No one reaches for binoculars aggressively. They just watch. Quiet. The whale surfaces again, spouting long and steady, as if acknowledging the small human presence, keeping careful distance. You think about harmony again. Not the naive kind, but the hard-won sort. Marine protected areas expanding, indigenous knowledge guiding policy, technology serving restraint instead of extraction. Whale songs stream live to classrooms in Texas and Tokyo, helping children thousands of miles away understand stakes. They inherit efforts to quiet shipping, develop rope-less gear, reroute traffic. All imperfect, all advancing. The boat rocks gentle on a long swell. Ice glints on the horizon, smaller every year. You pull your jacket closer and feel the vast patience beneath you. Hearts beating slower than human hurry. Lives spanning centuries of change. The whales keep singing, adapting, migrating. Humans keep listening, adjusting, trying to match that patience. Sleep comes easy tonight. The cabin window cracked to cool Arctic air. The hydrophone left running plays soft bow head moans through the bulkhead deep. Unhurried. Older than worry in dreams you drift weightless through warming water, following a song that bends but never breaks, leading to new feeding grounds under a sun that barely sets. The vessel glides on, lights low to avoid confusing night foragers. You let the slow rhythm of recorded calls and distant ice creaks pull you under, deep into a sleep as open and shifting as the seascape itself. The conversation continues, older than climate, patient as evolution, carried now on voices that have outlasted every era of human mistake. And as the midnight sun holds steady on the edge of the world, you drift completely, held in the shared breath of ancient animals and careful newcomers, dreaming of roots not yet drawn, songs not yet composed, harmonies still finding their way. The low bow head songs from the warming Arctic linger in your ears as the research vessel fades into mist, and you find yourself drifting once more, this time not to a place or era, but simply into the vast, quiet space between all of them. You float weightless above the ocean of time, watching the long silver thread that connects every chapter you've traveled. From the first wide-eyed encounter on a prehistoric beach to the careful satellite tags of tomorrow, the thread glimmers, sometimes taut with tension, sometimes slack with distance, but it never breaks. 1,000 years of misunderstandings. Yes, but also 1,000 years of slow, stubborn learning. You see it all at once. The way dreams sometimes let you hold opposites without contradiction. The cedar digouts gliding out at dawn beside modern Zodiacs with disentanglement gear. The red glow of tri-works reflected in the soft blue screens of acoustic monitors. The harpoons rusting in museums while children in classrooms thousands of miles inland fall asleep to strained whale song. The same massive hearts beating beneath every era, scarred, resilient, patient. A mainstream truth we carry now. The story of whales and humans is one of the longest continuous relationships any two species have ever shared on this planet. From spiritual kin to commodity, from near extermination to fierce protection, from silence to renewed listening, no other animal has mirrored our capacity for both destruction and redemption quite so clearly. You drift closer to the thread and see the small, odd moments that always made you smile along the way. Mussel shell harpoon tips, poison bottles in colonial shallops, scrimshaw carved by homesick hands, self-burning tri-works fat, record albums that stopped embassies, whales seeming to wait for rescue cutters, songs used as thermometers for a warming world. All those quirky human details, clumsy, inventive, sometimes cruel, sometimes tender, woven into the same long cord. Here rests the gentle, slightly cheeky detail that ties it together. Whales have outlasted every single human method we invented to take them: stone points, iron harpoons, explosive lances, factory ships with sonar and spotter planes. Every technology rose, peaked, and faded, while the whales kept diving deep, singing low, migrating slow. They didn't win by fighting back, they won by enduring, by being too vast and patient for our hurried greed to fully grasp. A quiet cosmic joke, perhaps, on the species that thought it was in charge. You watched the thread shimmer through recent decades, protests turning to policy, policy turning to culture, culture turning to daily habit. Ships slowing voluntarily in migration lanes, fishers testing ropeless traps, school kids adopting individual right, whales like pen pals, indigenous youth paddling ancestral routes with GPS backups. None of it perfect. Entanglements still happen, ship strikes still grieve, climate shifts still unsettle, but the direction has changed. The conversation no longer asks how many can we take, it asks how much space can we share. Scholars and storytellers still argue over what the future holds. Some predict recovery for resilient species within human lifetimes. Others warn of cascading losses if warming accelerates. Some celebrate the moratorium as success. Others point to persistent illegal hunts or scientific whaling loopholes. The debates will continue, as they should, but beneath the arguments runs the same steady pulse. Massive hearts beating slower than ours, reminding us that not every story needs to hurry toward an ending. You feel the thread beneath your fingertips, now rough in places from old scars, smooth in others from careful handling. It hums faintly, like distant whale song traveling through water and time. You understand, without needing words, that the misunderstandings were never just mistakes. They were the only way to such different beings could learn each other's shape, by reaching, sometimes grasping to heart, sometimes letting go just in time. The ocean spreads endless below you, dark and bright at once. Spouts rise here and there across centuries. Gray whales near ancient villages, rights off colonial beaches, sperms under square-rigged sails, humpbacks beside rainbow-painted protest boats, bowheads in newly opened Arctic leads. All the same breath, offered and received, again and again. You let yourself sink gently toward the water, not to any single moment, but to the quiet space between them. All. The thread wraps loosely around your wrist, not binding, just connecting. You feel small, but not in a diminishing way, more like a single note in a very long song that doesn't need to resolve tonight. The whales keep their ancient rhythms, humans keep adjusting theirs, imperfectly, persistently. The conversation continues, not finished, not flawless, but alive with awe and error and quiet hope. You breathe out slow, matching the distant spouts you can no longer separate by era. The water closes soft over you, cool and welcoming. No more chasing, no more taking, just drifting together in the same vast current. And as the last light of every era blends into one gentle glow, you let go completely, carried deeper than any dive, into the peaceful heart of the long, long story. The ocean holds you the way it has always held them, patient, immense, forgiving in its own slow way. You rest there, weightless, listening to the single endless note beneath every chapter. We are here. We are here. We are here. Sleep wraps you now, deeper than any before. Soft as moonlight on endless water, the thread hums once more, a lullaby older than words. And you answer without sound. Yes, we hear you now. The vast shared breath rises and falls, rises and falls. And everything, for this quiet moment, is enough. You drift in that enoughness, held gentle and safe, dreaming without images, just the slow, steady rhythm of hearts far larger than yours, beating in patient harmony with your own. The long misunderstanding softens into something closer to understanding, not complete, perhaps never complete, but close enough to rest in. The tide has carried us all the way to the end of this long journey together. You've walked prehistoric beaches, stood on blood-slicked decks, sung protest songs under starry skies, and floated above warming Arctic leads. You've felt the weight of harpoons and the lightness of careful distance. You've listened as the same massive hearts kept beating through every human mistake and every small redemption. Now the water is quiet. The spouts have settled into soft memory. The thread between species rests easy in the dark, humming low like a lullaby that needs no translation. Let your shoulders loosen. Let the day's sharp edges blur. Let the vast, patient ocean take every leftover worry and carry it far beyond the horizon. You're safe here, held in the same current that has cradled whales for millennia. Nothing is required of you now except this slow, shared breath. Inhale the salt and cedar and starlight of every era at once. Exhale the long story, gentle and complete. The whales are sleeping deep tonight, dreaming their ancient dreams. You are welcome to dream with them. Good night.